It is Tuesday, and the Wise Guys are back. Hello, world. Dave McCann, Blaine Fowler. We've got an awesome show tonight. We're live on Facebook for the first time, also live on YouTube and Twitch, and, of course, at ysguys.com, which means we're expanding our global empire to unite Cougar Nation in a most unique way here in prime time.
And we don't care how you watch us. Just make sure you watch us. We would like you to subscribe wherever you're doing it. And remember, all of these different platforms, subscriptions are free. So
yeah, that's the favorite price of everyone.
Yeah, that's my favorite price. And again, I'll tell you, as Vi Sikahema always says, if it's free, it's for me, and I'll take 3. That's Vi's motto in life. So.
And we've always said the more subscriptions and likes we get, the longer our wives will let us do this show.
Exactly.
And for a middle of the month of January, we got a lot going on.
Yeah, and here's the thing. If you always watch us on YouTube, certainly you should subscribe. But, hey, why not go over on Twitch and subscribe there and subscribe on Facebook, whatever. Wherever you can subscribe, do it, and then watch it wherever you want.
Just
that would help
do
us.
it. Here's what we got tonight. BYU in the Big 12. What the moment was like when the Power 5 conference called BYU. And when are we going to get that fall football schedule? Deputy Athletic Director Brian Santiago is going to join us.
And BYU's men's basketball hits the road for a big series in the WCC. Hall of Famer Danny Ainge will join us, and we'll talk college basketball, Cougs, and maybe even a little pro basketball.
When he walked in here a few minutes ago, the class level of our show went up.
Yeah, absolutely.
When he walks out of here in about an hour, we'll see where we're at.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're getting a bump coming in. BYU hits the road for a big series in the WCC. As you mentioned, the women are home in a big series in the WCC. Lauren Gustin continues her dominance on the glass as the nation's top rebounder. Her Cougars are riding a 6-game winning streak.
How about the fact that 2 of the 3 games, so she had 3 20-rebound games plus, 20-plus, last week and a half. And 2 of those games, she out-rebounded the other team all by herself.
How do you even do that? Yeah, they got 5 players out there.
It's crazy. And Kristen Kozlowski, who normally calls the women's games, had to miss a game. I went and called the game. And I'm not kidding you, 6 minutes into the game, there was a timeout. And I turned to Spencer and said, is she going to get every rebound in the game?
Seems like it.
It just feels like she's going to get every board on both ends.
I was on Sports Nation yesterday, and we interviewed Fusini Traore. Mm-hmm. And at the end, when we were done, I said, hey, are you watching Gustin on rebounds? And he goes, she is the best.
She is ridiculous.
So even the men's team are watching to go, how many rebounds she get tonight?
Yeah. 24 one day, 26, 21. That's how she's going. So, hey, how about men's volleyball back at the Smith Fieldhouse, looking to stay perfect on the young season, having a really good start. And people are saying a lot of new faces, young. Maybe this is Sean never rebuilds. He just reloads, right? Is this a reload year for them? Or, I don't know. Is this a year where they go compete for another national championship?
He was optimistic that they're building for a grand future when he was on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Off to a good start. Our headlines tonight, the Big 12 schedule. It was rumored to come out today by the athletic director at the University of Central Florida, and then Houston's AD kind of also implied that it might be today, and then both backed off, and the day's come and gone, and there's no schedule.
Right. But hey, we'll have Brian Santiago. We talked to him about it the other night at the basketball game. He has a few thoughts on what might be holding it up, and certainly we should have it by the 1st of February, and that'll be fun to see what's going on. So we'll quiz Brian a little bit about that when he comes in a little bit later.
BYU finalizes their 2024 non-conference schedule. August 31st, it'll be Southern Illinois, September 7th at Utah, and September 14th at Wyoming. They're going to keep the date over in Laramie.
Yeah, interesting. And I think as they move forward, they're going to have to balance things out when they're playing in the Big 12. I don't know that you want to play 2 P5s ever, but right now there's some years where there's still 2 P5s on the preseason schedule. So, home game against Utah Tech was moved from 24 to 26, and then BYU canceled future home and home series with future home and home with Miami in 26 and 28. That's in preparation for life in this Big 12. So in 2026, they've got Utah Tech, Arizona, South Florida, all at home, and then at Utah. Is that too much? I don't know. And then
maybe one of those will be in Vegas.
Well, in 2028, they have at Utah and Ole Miss.
I think Ole Miss is going to be out of there.
Yeah,
I don't see that happening.
Do you really want to play 2 P5s in your preseason schedule and then play 9 in your regular season schedule? That's probably a little much.
Speaking of P5s, did you know that Danny Ainge was recruited by Oregon to play receiver?
Do you know
We're
that
definitely going to talk about
when
that.
Danny was here, I wanted him to come out and catch some balls and play some wide receiver.
He wouldn't do it?
No, he was too busy.
Playing baseball?
Yeah, and playing on my softball team with Dave Palferman and all that group.
Spring practice, early March. That's when we'll see Keaton Slovis on the field.
We'll start the first week in March, and then as we get the official schedule, we'll let you know. But just plan on the month of March is spring practice time. So it usually starts that very first week of March, and they have the option to extend it and practice fewer times a week. And so we haven't gotten the final schedule yet, but hopefully by next week we'll have that and we can roll it out for you. But hey, clear March for spring ball.
It's been exciting.
Yes,
Be a lot of new faces to check out.
That's right.
BYU basketball splits with Gonzaga and Pepperdine. The 8th-ranked Bulldogs rallied late to beat the Cougars 75-74, and then BYU beat Pepperdine Saturday 91-81.
Yeah, and so now WCC standings, Gonzaga and St. Mary's are tied for first at 5-0. I think a little people are a little surprised St. Mary's is looking as good as they are. Their net is higher than Gonzaga's right now.
They'll be here in 2 weeks. We'll see what they got.
And then BYU's next at 4-2, followed by Santa Clara and Pacific, who are both 3-2.
Thursday, BYU's at Santa Clara. That's 11 Eastern, 9 Mountain. It's on the CBS Sports Network and BYU Radio.
And then Saturday, BYU San Francisco. That's 8 Eastern, 6 Mountain. That's going to be on CBS Sports Network and BYU Radio. Hey, the Dons might be the surprise team.
I don't know. They're 1-5.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They
the bad surprise.
Yeah, everybody projected that they would have the length and athleticism to compete, maybe even challenge Gonzaga this year, and they're 1-5.
Yeah.
What's going on?
They're going to play BYU tough because they know it's the Cougs' last visit to the hilltop.
They're scary because when Shabazz gets making, he can all of a sudden score 40, and then the next night he has 8. And it seems like he has 40 when they play BYU.
Yeah.
So.
There's some guys that seem to just light it up. The dude from Pepperdine is a guy who lights it up against BYU.
Yeah, he likes to play BYU.
I'm trying to think of his last name. Millett.
Yeah.
And he was on fire until the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, Millett has like 80 points in his last 3 games against BYU.
Next home game for the Cougars, as mentioned, St. Mary's on the 28th at 10 Eastern, 8 Mountain. That's on ESPN2. As mentioned, Danny Ainge is going to join us in a couple minutes. We'll get his take on the Cougars and his opinion on what they'll face next year in the Big 12. If you just want a glimpse, all you have to do is look at the AP Top 25.
In the Big 12, number 1, Houston, right? They have 7 teams ranked in the top 21 of the AP Top 25. 6 coming in at 14 or better.
Yeah, and we include Houston because they're coming in with BYU.
Right, and if you look at the power rankings over the last decade, for 10 straight years at the end of the season, the Big 12 has been ranked as the number 1 conference in college basketball. It's because there's a lot of depth, obviously. Well, and the teams at the top are really good. When you got Kansas and Houston who's going in, Baylor.
Yeah, and the teams that aren't really good
Kansas, Baylor,
are still forecast as a bubble team for the big dance.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the whole league might get
there was some talk that every team in the league at one point about 2 weeks ago was a likely big dance candidate. So,
yeah, it's incredible stuff. Women's hoop, BYU, they swept their road trip to LMU and Pepperdine. They've now won 6 straight for Amber Whiting.
Right, and as you mentioned, Lauren Gustin, the number 1 rebounder in the NCAA. She's pulled down 20 rebounds or more in 3 straight games. And 2 of those 3, as mentioned, she out-rebounded the other team.
You got to watch her to see what she's going to do next. In the WCC standings for the women, Gonzaga's in first at 7-0. Portland's next at 6-1, followed by BYU. And the Cougars will host both the Zags and the Pilots during the final week of the regular season before we all get together down in Vegas for the tournament.
Right, and it seems like BYU started out a lot of new faces like the men. But it seems like they figured their roles out. Like everybody knows what they're supposed to do at this point, and they're really kind of coming together at the right time. So they could be a factor in that WCC tournament. There's a chance they could go win that thing.
You can see Lauren and the Cougars Thursday morning, 11 Mountain Time, 1 in the afternoon Eastern. They play San Francisco, and that's the game where they invite all the 4th graders.
Yeah.
So the decibel level's through the roof even before the game even starts.
It's the loudest thing you've ever heard in your life. It's like a jet engine because it's a different kind of loud.
Yeah, you got to watch. You got to watch to listen to that, to see that, and also to see what Gustin's going to do.
Yeah, and then Saturday, Santa Clara is at BYU on the women's side, 4 Eastern, 2 Mountain. That is also on BYU TV.
Men's volleyball back in action Friday against Fairleigh Dickinson. That's at 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain. That one's on the BYU TV app, and then they play Saturday night at 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain on BYU TV. The Cougars are ranked number 13.
Yep, 13th in the country. So gymnastics, Boise State at BYU Friday, 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain. That is on BYU TV. And that gymnastics team's loaded.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll see how they do against Boise, and they're building. BYU baseball, that season opener's coming up February 17th. That's next month, by the way, against Louisiana Tech. On the road, head coach Trent Pratt will be in studio with us next week.
Right, and then BYU softball, the season opener's on February 9th against North Carolina. That's going to be – we should go cover this. It's in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
We should go cover that.
Yeah, Gordon Eakin's going to be on with us in 2 weeks, the head coach from tonight, 2 weeks from tonight.
That softball program is already Big 12 ready.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
For their final.
There's women's soccer, women's volleyball. Isn't it interesting? A lot of women's sports, you just go, yeah, of course.
Cross country,
men's track and field, men's and women's cross country and track and field.
Women's golf.
Yeah, are ready to compete right now in that league and compete for championships. Of course, men's volleyball.
They'll stay out.
They'll stay in the Mountain Pacific Sports Federation, which is the top league in college volleyball. So if there was a Big 12 volleyball, but there isn't, they would go in and be really, really good. So.
All right, before we get to our visit with Danny Ainge, the Learfield Directors Cup final fall standings are out, and BYU is standing tall right with the best of America.
That's right. Number 1, Stanford. Number 2, North Carolina, and then BYU, number 3, followed by Ohio State, Syracuse, Penn State, Pittsburgh, Texas. And just, because we like to say this, Utah finished at number 43 in the fall. 43.
BYU's number 3. Stanford plays like 90 sports, which helps them get a bunch of points.
Right.
But to be standing there at number 3, the Cougars have finished in the top 5 of the fall standings for 4 straight years.
Right.
And you get your points. They're awarded by each institution's finish in the NCAA championships.
Well, and we mentioned some sports that are fall sports just a minute ago that we said are Big 12 ready right now, like cross country is a fall sport. BYU's a top 5 in both men's and women's in cross country. Women's soccer is phenomenal and always right up there. So yeah, they get a lot of points in the fall, but BYU's perennially been in the top 20 every season when it's all said and done.
So this year they got their points from men's cross country, women's cross country, women's soccer, women's volleyball, and they got some points for BYU winning the New Mexico Bowl.
When you win a bowl game, you get points.
And so that has them number 3 in all the land. Again, we remind you we're live. Tonight's our debut live on Facebook.
That's right.
Which we love. We're building that audience. There's a lot of BYU fans that have easier access to Facebook than maybe YouTube and Twitch, but we're there as well, and ysguys.com.
Yep.
And let's bring in our man of the hour. Our first guest tonight lives by the mantra, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice, which is why my mom has always loved him. He's also the only student athlete in BYU history to play professional baseball in the summer and be a star for Cougar basketball during the winter. And he did that for 3 years. He led BYU to the Sweet 16 in 1981 and was named National Basketball Player of the Year. He played 14 seasons in the NBA and won 3 world championships, 2 as a player and 1 as an executive. Currently the CEO of the Utah Jazz, proud member of the BYU Hall of Fame, and his number 22 jersey hangs in the rafters at the Marriott Center. Pleasure to welcome the great Danny Ainge to the Wise Guys. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
When you see that jersey up there, and you see it a lot because you come to a lot of games, is it cool every time?
I honestly don't look up there very often, but when it happened, it was very cool.
Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know if I think about it much since then, but it was a great experience.
When we look up there and we look at the all the ones that are up there, that's a pretty unique and really cool group that is up there. Kresimir Chosic is up there with you, and
Roland Minson,
our guys that were part of that NIT group back in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
And then Stan Watts up there, so it's a pretty select group up there, pretty cool group of guys.
No, it's very cool. I mean, I don't know a lot about all those players, but I do know a lot about Kresimir, and I've heard so much about him over my career, and had a chance to watch him once in person. But yeah, he was very, very special.
The only time I've ever been up in the rafters was on a Cub Scout trip.
You were up in there?
When they used to take you up there in the walking areas on the tour of the Marriott Center. That's about as close as a McCann will be in the rafters. But number 22 is there every time we go. And as guys who watched you play, and it's a reminder of one, how spectacular Jimmer and Tyler had to be to score more points. And we've had both those guys on the show, and they always pay tribute to you.
And they both acknowledged proactively that you didn't have a three-point line. They both said that. They're like, Danny didn't have the three-point line.
Well,
so
I think the amount of games has changed over the years, and I also think maybe more important than the three-point line for scoring is a shot clock.
Yeah.
The shot clock was a big deal for us. We were one of the top scoring teams in the nation, but 3 or 4 games every year it would be in the 40s or 30s. I remember one game I think we beat Hawaii 32-30 or something.
They just take the ball and play 4 corners and just hold it.
Well, remember Phil Ford they were running those 4 corners, right, at North Carolina?
Yeah. Oh man.
We did our share of that, with leads late in games in those eras, but it certainly is not conducive to lots of scoring.
No, and what's interesting is back in the day as a kid, when you were a fan and we were running the 4-court offense to eat the clock, we were all okay with that. It's like, oh, yeah, that's our strategy. Now when you see teams getting late in the shot clock, you're like, why haven't they shot 3 times already?
Right. Well, another thing about scoring, I see it in the NBA and throughout my whole career, but when, I don't think it's a coincidence. I averaged like 24 points a game my senior year when Devin wasn't there.
Right.
Like Devin was a fantastic player. And, we're not going to also, we're all going to score a lot less if Devin's playing and Fred's playing. And, but yeah, who you're playing with matters a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned those guys, and when we get reminiscing about great teams in the history of BYU sports, period, not just in basketball, I think back to guys you're talking about, and when you had Greg and Fred and you and Steve Trumbo and Steve Craig, and Devin was part of that team before he went on a mission and came back. What an unbelievable group of talented players that you were with at that time. And we'd be really hard-pressed to find a group across the board as deep with as much talent as that group. What's your thought? Has there been a team that has had the kind of talent that one had?
I don't think so. Fred, I think, played 14 years in the NBA, and Greg, I think, played 12 for 13 years, Greg Kite. And then, Devin played in the NBA, and Scott Runya had a terrific career overseas in Europe. Just didn't want to play anymore with family things going on. And Steve Craig played some in the professional ranks. So yeah, we had a pretty stacked team. Trumbo had a great career over in Spain.
Yeah,
we got a chance to visit with Steve.
Yeah, we had a good visit with Steve when he was in. Yeah, Steve reminds me of Lauren Gustin. Like, there were times when I thought, is Steve going to get every rebound in this game? Like, he would just go after it.
No, he was a rebounding machine, no doubt about it.
During your time on campus, you had Jim McMahon and Steve Young playing football, and Blaine. Tina Gunn was playing for the women's basketball team. Wally Joyner was on the baseball team. Keith Clearwater and Bobby Clampett were on the golf team. And Marie Osmond was in the student body. What a unique time to be on campus, late 70s, early 80s. What was that like?
Well, first of all, you bring up Marie. She might have been the most important of all that. But I remember when I came on my recruiting trip, they made it a point for me to meet Marie.
Oh, yeah?
She probably has no recollection of any of that.
Oh, she will remember, believe me.
And but anyway, it was, that was kind of cool. She was a star. But yeah, watching Jim McMahon, I haven't seen a college quarterback that's been more exciting than Jim. Jim played a lot my sophomore year, where Gifford was the quarterback when I first got to BYU. And at one point in my life, I thought about playing college football, and maybe college baseball would be a better combination. And but then basketball season started, and my mind changed from week to week. But when I first got here to BYU, and I was watching those teams play and pass the football, it was killing me. Like, dang, I could go out there and catch 15 passes maybe.
And they had to have known that Oregon offered you a scholarship to play receiver, right? Lavell had to know that you were an All-American football player.
I was heavily recruited by BYU and Utah and Notre Dame and Michigan State. I was recruited by all the Pac-8 schools in that era for football, mostly as a receiver. Some recruited me as a safety, but most recruited me as a receiver.
So what was the difference maker? Why did you decide?
Like I said, basketball season started, and
it was just
my
better.
Heart changed, and maybe standing on the sidelines at Oregon State football game and just seeing, I mean, I was like 6'4", 165 pounds, and I'm going like, oh my gosh, like these guys are huge.
Yeah.
That might add a little bit to do with it too.
Isn't it fun though? So Danny could have played any of those three sports. Obviously played two at the professional level, but at wide receiver, he would have filled out. He'd been an NFL wide receiver at that height, between 6'4" and 6'5", with the skill set that he had. He's an All-American in high school in that sport as well. But he ends up in basketball, and he just mentioned Giff. Giff came to play basketball, and Lavell convinced him to come out and play quarterback.
Gary Scheide still thinks he came to pitch.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Gary came here to play baseball, and he ends up playing quarterback there. So sometimes whatever's going on just leads you to your path, and then that path goes. With yours, it was because when, the decision-making process had to come later for you on, am I just going to continue to pursue this career in professional baseball, or do I pivot and go try to make a living playing basketball? How did that come to pass?
I thought I was going to play baseball. I loved baseball. When I got to professional baseball, and I had played for an ex-major leaguer in high school in American Legion, and played 70 some odd games each summer from the time I was about 14 years old through my high school career. And I really thought baseball was a longer career. It was a more glamorous career to me at a certain point in my life, for sure, when I signed a baseball contract coming out of high school. But I think that I learned more in baseball, in my professional baseball life, in the first 3 or 4 months than I had learned my whole life. And, basketball was different. Like, basketball must have been more in my blood, and my brothers played, and my father was a player. And, I didn't really feel like I learned that much. I learned the tricks of the trade from the veteran players, but, it was not near as much. I always knew a lot more about basketball than I did baseball. And I guess ultimately my senior year, having a good year, I just didn't want to. I still loved baseball just as much. I wasn't excited about the NBA, especially if it wasn't the Lakers or the Celtics. But I had another year on my contract, so I was drafted later, and I told everybody I was going to honor that contract, and so don't draft me and waste a draft pick. But it gave me a lot of leverage and gave me an opportunity to go to the Celtics. Thank goodness.
Yeah, because if you don't have that hanging over you, you probably don't end up at the Celtics. You probably end up at a team, like I think of Zach Wilson right now, and when he gets drafted by the Jets, of course I grew up in New York, I was like, no, please, no. Can't he fall to 3 and play for the Niners? But the fact that you were playing baseball, that paved the way for you to be at one of those teams that you wanted to be, right?
I think so. I think, Red had multiple picks. I mean, Charles Bradley was a big player in our conference that year and was a great player, but he was the first-round pick. Tracy Jackson was a 6'6" wing player, also drafted in the first round by the Celtics ahead of me that same year. And then by the time they got to the second round in the 31st pick, I think, it was a no-brainer for Red. He had a stacked team, a championship-level team, and other draft picks. So it wasn't near as big a risk for him as it was for other teams. So that was a blessing.
Yeah.
So before all that happens, you're playing for the Blue Jays in the summer, and you're playing for the Cougars in the winter. And we mentioned all the superstars on campus at that time. So how did you meet your wife, Michelle?
I got to BYU a few weeks early, maybe even a month early, and was here playing pickup games and working out, and getting in shape, trying to get used to the altitude. I dated a handful of times. There were dances before school started.
Yeah.
I met a lot of people. I met Michelle the first day of class, and we talked, but we didn't date for a month and a half or so after we first met. But once we dated, then we dated for the next 2 years.
But what was the conversation like when you tried to convince her that to provide a living for her and your future family, you wanted to play sports?
She had no idea who I was at first, or that I was had a baseball contract or playing for the BYU basketball team even. It was much before that. And So we just hit it off. I mean, she did see me play intramural football. I wasn't supposed to be playing, but I was playing.
He used to play
play softball when he wasn't supposed to be playing too, right?
I tell her that she fell in love with me watching me play quarterback on the intramural football field. Yeah,
that's awesome.
And is she like Brent Blaine's wife's into sports? My wife could care less about sports. Where's Michelle on the sports spectrum?
She may be one of the most competitive people I've been around. She's a competitor. I mean, she plays mostly tennis and pickleball now, but she played softball in high school, and she's into sports.
So she got what you were going through.
She's a Toulson, so she's related to all the Toulsons.
Yeah, she comes from a real sports family. So Brenda and Michelle played tennis together, and I asked Brenda when they started to play, when you guys moved back out, and I said, how's Michelle? And Brenda goes, her exact words, "Oh, she's intense. It's awesome." Because Brenda's pretty intense too. Like Brenda really likes to when she goes, "She's intense. It's awesome." And I'm like, she's married to Danny. That doesn't surprise me at all, right?
No, it's her. It's the other way around. She's intense, and like my kids are intense, and mostly because of her.
Describe the feeling of your first major league home run with the Blue Jays, which was June 2nd, 1979, and compare that joy to your first Little League home run.
Oh, wow. I mean, hitting a home run in the major leagues is fun. It was in Seattle, so it was in Northwest. I had a lot of family and friends that were, growing up in Oregon that were there at the game. So that was fun. I think still the highlights of baseball were just, playing in Yankee Stadium and playing in Fenway Park. I mean, those were just playing against Reggie Jackson and Billy Martin, coaching third base and managing the team, and Thurman Munson talking to me as I walked to the plate. It's those were very special. Those might have been more exciting and fulfilling dreams than playing in the NBA Finals against the Lakers in the Forum. Playing in those at such a young age in those ballparks was amazing.
Do you remember your first Little League home run, or have you had too many big shots since?
I don't remember my first one. I remember my first one. I don't remember what age I was, but I remember, it's inside the park. You just hit it in that.
And
in
just
the
run.
gap,
Just run.
I was always pretty fast, so I made a home run more often than I probably deserve. I didn't hit it very far, but hit it in the right spot.
Well, your home run with the Blue Jays, it lasted for 40 years as the youngest player to hit a home run in Toronto history until Vladimir Guerrero hit one in 2019. So for 40 years,
that's quite an amazing thing.
Yeah, I think I hit two, and it took him maybe 2 weeks to hit two.
Yeah, probably right. Or two at bats for Guerrero.
Right.
But you're very accomplished in a lot of sports. You're a tremendous golfer as well. And so Dave and I were thinking it would be fun to know your opinion. What's the most difficult thing to do? Is it hitting a baseball thrown by a major league pitcher? Taking it coast to coast in a college game and making a last-second shot against Notre Dame, hitting a three-point basket against the Lakers in the NBA Finals, or hitting a golf ball out of a bunker at Riverside when lunch is on the line? Which is
I mean, I think hitting a major league slider and sinker are the toughest when you play against a player such as Jack Morris.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe the best pitcher in the 90s. Hitting a Nolan Ryan fastball of over 100 miles an hour. I mean, those are challenging, but I think the sinker and slider from Jack Morris might have been the
most difficult task of all
sports, I would think.
Not hitting a ball out of the bunker to beat Santiago for lunch.
No, that's
or Finau or any of those guys.
I don't even have to hit it that close to beat Santiago. I just got to get it somewhere on the green.
Dave and I, Governor Herbert's been a really great golf partner for Dave and I, and I love playing with the governor because when you hit a bad one, he just goes, Blaine, governor's pardon, just go again.
And then his Secret Service would help us find our balls.
They would find the balls, and I would say, Governor, you're not the governor anymore. You retired, so that doesn't work. He goes, oh no, governor's pardons work, like even when you're out of office. So he's the best to play with. No bad shots.
I play a lot with Santiago. I think he just takes a governor's pardon on his own.
Now that's illegal. He can't do that, but I'm sure he does.
Who's the best? Because I know you've played a lot of golf. Who's the best professional athlete you've played with that's not a professional golfer at golf?
Steph Curry.
So Steph's a really good player, huh?
Yeah, he's very good.
We see him on those celebrity tours every now and
Yeah.
then. lighting it
His
up.
dad is very good too. Steph's a little better, I think.
So did he
but
grow
Del-
up?
Del
He grew
Curry
up playing then.
Yeah.
Steph did. Used to play with Michael a lot, with Michael Jordan.
Played a lot with Michael. Michael's a very competitive guy. Has an amazing short game. Plays so much golf. Plays at his own course. I think 200, 250 rounds a year.
And then on the other end of the spectrum is like, and I haven't played with Charles, but Charles Barkley was right in front of me at the TPC at Summerlin one time, and I watched him play. It almost made me play bad. I almost got a hitch in my swing. It was when he was really struggling with that. He would start his downswing and stop. I don't know if he's still doing that. I hope it's fixed because it was painful.
Yeah, Charles and I played a lot of golf when we played together for 3 years in Phoenix, and with Dan Marley, we played a lot of golf, and Charles was pretty good. I mean, he shot in the 80s most of the time. I remember one day we were playing, and he had to par 18 to shoot 78. And then when he went to Lake Tahoe in the celebrity tournament, which was, putt everything, every shot matters, television cameras everywhere, and of course Charles is going to attract a lot of attention. And I think that got him. And he was hitting balls at the end of that round, and it was like he had a little bit of the yips, and it just got worse. And he tried everything to fix it, and including, I was told, I didn't see this, that he got a set of left-handed clubs for like a year.
And trying to go lefty.
Trying to go lefty, but he is back playing, and he's made a challenge, and so we got to get together and play. He said he's ready for me, and he's back to his game.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I had heard that he was a decent player before the travesty that I saw out on
I've never heard that he was a decent player. Like, everybody has potential.
No.
I heard. I mean, I used to say to him, "You're like one of the best athletes I've ever seen. To be able to hit a ball as you stop your downswing, and like you still make contact.
That is something.
BYU Hall of Famer Danny Ainge, who's also a 3-time NBA world champion and current CEO of the Utah Jazz, on the Wise Guys tonight. Let's go back to your first practice at Boston in November 1982, following a court battle with the Blue Jays and the Celtics, which the Celtics win, so you can leave baseball and join the roster. You walk into the gym, there's Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, and Kevin McHale. What happened next?
There's also Cedric Maxwell.
Yeah, there's the rest of the team.
There's some other really good players. We scrimmaged that day. Really the only thing I remember about that day, because I practiced, the team had been on the road, and I practiced for a few days on my own. With ML Carr was working with me on teaching me some things, but we scrimmaged that day. And the thing I remember the most clearly is Cedric Maxwell sitting on the stage by our court and counting out my shots, like 3 for 11, 4 for 14, 5 for 16.
Because you came in highly touted.
Yeah, I came in highly touted.
That's
and,
brutal.
We had a really good team, and it was funny because the coach was Bill Fitch on that day, and he came over, and I didn't shoot the ball well, but he came over to me and said, it's not as easy as you thought, is it? And my first thought was, like, those are the easiest shots I've ever got in a game. I could get a shot anytime I wanted, but I just didn't make them. And, shooting the ball that year, because I came in the middle of a season of a really good team, and so I wasn't playing very much, and I shot the ball miserably that year. I remember Cedric was working with me one day at a game in New Jersey, and I was shooting the ball pretty well before the game, and I came in. I didn't even know if I'd play that night, and I came in the game, and my first shot hit the side of the backboard from the baseline, and he just went. I could just see him on the sideline going, "I'm just wasting my time."
Well, the McCanns were all in because you were there, and I remember no one waved a towel better than ML Carr when he needed to get the crowd going. But was there ever a time when you're out there with Larry when you said, "Hey, Larry, how about getting me the ball"?
No, that didn't happen.
Not one time.
I remember just to put in perspective. I remember I'm coming off of screens, and like I said, I could get shots. With those guys setting screens when I wanted. And the coach pulls me aside, Bill Fitch, and he says, "Okay, like what do you expect to make on that shot?" I go, "I don't know, 52% I'm going to make on those turnouts." And he's going like, "What does he shoot?" Points to Larry. I go, "Yeah, 60. He goes, "What does he shoot?" And points to McHale. He goes, 60. And it's like, do you get my point? Like, we don't need 52% shots, coming off of down screens. And so, like, it just kind of, it changed me, but it was right. If you're going to try to win, like, those guys are just so special. They have to have the ball. I see the game now, and it's completely different. And I saw throughout I remember we had a kid named Connor Henry who showed up maybe 3 years after this incident. He came in for a 10-day contract out of the G League. And he doesn't know any better, right? He's coming off screen. He's got his one crack at the NBA, and he's making all these shots. And I'm going, like, why is someone not saying it to him? Like, he can't be shooting those shots. But, you know, there's part of it that, you know, winning is what it's all about. And, you know, changing your game to win and conform to what's best for your team. I did have a good time. You know, I think I scored probably my 10 highest scoring games of my career were when Bird didn't play or McHale or both of them didn't play. And so we used to have shoot around and like auction off or bet on those shots. Like I get 10 of Larry's shots tonight. If I make a shot.
Larry's not
I get
playing.
3 of his McHale shots. And so that was, those were fun games. But, you know, playing with those guys, obviously we won a couple championships, went to the finals 4 years in a row. And those guys were a dream to play with.
How long were you there? Now you're face to face with him, you're playing, you're a teammate. Before you, and was there a moment where you're just about Larry Bird? Whoa, this dude is really special and he's different than all the rest. And did that moment, or did you already know that before you got there?
Yeah, I knew it before I got there, but there are moments when you're there and up close and personal, and you see everything that about him, his work ethic, and you know, the thing that stands out is his confidence. You know, I always consider myself a confident player, but, you know, Larry was an entirely different level. I mean, there's so many stories I have about just him taking games over and, you know, we coach, you call a play, and, like, he's not running the play. Like, it's just, okay, he's just going to take it and score. Like, but he just had so much belief in himself, and he could get a shot, you know, with double teams at the end of games. Like, teams knew what we were running, and they'd still, like, he'd still get a quality look off it. At being 6'10" and being able to shoot the way he did.
So how did you ever take the floor in the NBA Finals against the Lakers, and you look down there and it's Magic and Kareem and their group, and you've got your group, and you're in it. You're part of this thing.
Yeah. I mean, it was fun. It was very special. I mean, those teams were stacked, both the Lakers and the Celtics in that early to mid 80s. You know, Kareem, you know, arguably one of the greatest players that's ever lived, and you got Bird and Magic, who, you know, transformed the entire league. And then you got players like Worthy and Byron Scott and Bob McAdoo and McHale and Maxwell. And, I mean, we got a guy, Scott.
Rambus was in there at some point.
Yeah, but I didn't mention him on purpose. But we have a guy like Scott Wedman, who was the highest paid player during this era at one point, and was an NBA All-Star the year before we got him. And he couldn't even get on the court. I mean, he was like a 10-minute-a-game player and was a fantastic player. But
big three-point shooter, right?
Playing, playing behind Bird and McHale. But most people don't even know. Like, he was an All-Star.
It's interesting. We were talking about this with BYU in the Gonzaga game the other day. There's guys making shots all game long, and then the game's on the line, and it's coming down the stretch. And there were times we looked out on the floor and we're going, nobody even wants it right now. Like, nobody even wants the ball. And you were a guy that wanted the ball. And when you got with the Celtics and you're surrounded by a bunch of other guys that wanted the ball, you had to play a role. But it didn't mean that if they drew something up for you, you weren't like, yeah, give me the ball, I'll knock down that shot. What's the difference between a player that wants the ball in the third quarter and wants to make shots, but doesn't necessarily want it in the last 6 seconds of the ball game when the game's on the line?
Yeah, I think that as I look at those Celtics and Lakers teams, I think, you know, when you have a Byron Scott and a James Worthy and Dennis Johnson and Cedric Maxwell, like, those guys were all capable. They had been go-to guys throughout their high school, throughout their college careers, and none of them were afraid in the NBA because they had moments already. They had moments where, I mean, even though they're not going to run a play for me with Bird or McHale out on the court, like, if they're going to double my guy, or like I have to be prepared to take that shot.
Right.
And you're not afraid just because you've lived it and you've had that success, and I think you have that confidence and belief in yourself. And I think that, like, with BYU's team, they don't really have a guy that has been that person ever in their life. Maybe not even in high school, but probably. Yeah. But for sure not in college level yet. So I don't think they're afraid of it. I think that what happens is you gain confidence as your career goes along. And I think also there's such a tendency for people to play not to lose and just to take their foot off the gas, and they're thinking like, we got to hang on to this game. We got a 10-point lead and the game slows down. And so I don't think it's afraid to shoot. I think it's just sometimes not knowing how aggressive to be and how confident to play and how much swagger to have. And, the constant movement. You're trying to run the clock, or can you run the clock and still try to get the best shot at the same time? And the good teams can do that.
That describes the mentality of getting the ball with 5-6 seconds left in the NCAA tournament, and there's no way you were going to pass it. You were going to the hoop to beat Notre Dame. There wasn't time to pass it, but I have a feeling that it didn't cross your mind. It was just, I've just got to go score.
No, actually, I really did, because they had played a box and one on me the whole game, and I thought for sure they were going to trap me at somewhere along the court, along the way I could get across half court. But my intention was to get the ball up the court as fast as I could, and I was going to have to pass.
Really?
And, they just, because they spread out their defense, I was able to weave the way in and get by them. But I was anticipating having to hit Balliff, or, he had hit the shot before, or Steve Craig. I mean, somebody was going to need to make a shot, was really what was in my mind at that point.
So as you're moving through the lane, and I think Orlando Woolridge is moving over there, and Trapuka's somewhere on the floor, it's at this point you're just going, hey, they're not coming over here, and now I'm right at the rim? Oh,
yeah. No, I was just pushing it up the court, and they never stopped me. And so I just went all the way, and it just happened.
And we should say, though, I know this from that team, if you got double-teamed, you had every confidence that whoever you hit with that pass was going to knock down that shot.
Not really. Not in that game.
No,
we weren't making very many shots in that game.
It was the UCLA game.
Yeah, that's true.
Everything was going on.
True.
But we came back. I mean, that game was like crazy, because we came back from 13 down. We actually had no business winning that game, and they slowed the game way down. But there again, Notre Dame had like 6 or 7. I just mentioned Tracy Jackson and John Paxson and Joe Klein and Woldridge and Trapuka. Like this team was stacked.
Yeah.
And we had no business. Kite and Roberts had 4 fouls, and they got a 13-point lead. And I remember Frank Arnold saying, they're letting us stay in this game. Like, they're letting us, because we couldn't guard them if they would have just stayed aggressive. But they tried to slow the game down, and they allowed us back in the game. And we were very fortunate to win that game, obviously.
Danny Ainge on the Wise Guys tonight. You can join us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. Send us a question, wiseguys.com. We appreciate having you all with us in our time with Danny. Brian Santiago is coming up here in just a little bit.
Brian Santiago in the house.
We'll dive into some Big 12 and all that stuff. Plus, we got some golf questions for Santiago. We already had a golf answer or two from Danny.
Yep.
One last golf question about Michael Jordan, because you were in his special.
Was it 30 for 30? Well, it's just an ESPN special.
Yeah, whatever it was really good.
Yeah.
What was it like guarding him when you see all the assignments are different, and now you got 23, and then what meant more, beating the Bulls on the Celtics or beating Jordan by yourself on the golf course?
Oh, I mean, he was obviously, he's not the same kind of golfer, so like beating him on the golf course is fun and exciting, and he's good. I respect his game.
But you were better?
But I think I was a little better, but beating him on the basketball court where he's not better. I mean, Michael Jordan, the one thing about him that you can't ever deny is his entire career, every playoff series, even in '86 when we had this stacked team, we beat them in 3 straight games in the playoffs in the first round, but he was clearly the best player.
Didn't he have 66 in one of those games?
60-something.
That was one of the most fun games. I remember that game because down the stretch, he and Larry were just trading shots.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
Yeah, no, he was so special. But even then, he was the best player. And then throughout the rest of his career, as he started winning championships and, he got a little better team around him, there was never a doubt at the end of any series that he was ever in who the best player in the world was. It was Michael Jordan. And, I don't know who else that's been. I don't know what other player even comes close to, being undefeated and being the best player in a playoff series every year.
Did you enjoy your moments when you had to guard him as the ultimate challenge?
Yeah, the ultimate challenge. And if you did stop him, it was, a miracle. And if you didn't, like, so what? Nobody guards him. But I remember a funny time in this 63-point game. And I got accused of doing this a little bit more than the coaches or my teammates would have liked. But Walton fouls out, guarding Jordan in an ISO. And he's screaming and cursing me out, like, quit switching. Guard your own man.
This is Walton yelling at
Yelling
you
at you for switching with him.
I
on
go,
Jordan,
hey, I
on
just
Jordan.
want you to be able to appreciate how hard it is.
Classic.
Hey, when you listen as an old teammate of Bill Walton's, do you ever listen to him do a college basketball game?
I turn on the games just to watch him.
It's like
back east. That's the only reason I'm awake is watching Bill Walton.
You turn him on, and I'm just like,
commentary
my wife's like, why are you watching these two teams? And I go, I just have to hear what comes out of his mouth because it's just where he goes in a basketball game is like no other.
Was he like that in the locker room?
Yes.
Just the same?
He's a character.
Just-
I mean, he makes me laugh all the time. I mean, I remember one time, and, he used to stutter, even when he was playing with the Celtics. And sometimes we'd tease him about it because he was a tease and a practical joker. But I remember one time he was yelling at Jerry Seasting, and he was running down the court, and Seasting was guarding the ball, and he was in Walton's way as he's trying to sprint back on defense. And he looks at Jerry Seasting, he goes, the only thing I hate worse than guards is backup guards. But he was such a character. He made us laugh every day.
He reinvents the English language in just about every broadcast. We're like, I'm not sure what. Oh, you have to listen. You almost have to listen to him like you have to listen to the late elder Neil A. Maxwell in a talk, because you're just like, if I blink, I'm off. What you stay with him throughout,
you gotta
and at
stay
the
in
end
it.
you hope it makes sense.
Well, and I love, like, he'll take you down pathways. Like, he'll go study history of the university there, and he'll throw some stuff out there and bring it all together and then mix it with American history. And I'm just like, okay, I just got a history lesson. I'm watching North Carolina and Duke, but I just got a history lesson.
Most of it.
But I think people miss some of the funny things he says about the game.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's doing all this other off-topic things of a basketball game, and he's like talking about how bad the refs are. Like they're ruining the game of basketball.
And that the Pac-12 is the conference of champions no matter what.
Yeah.
Is there, if there's ever an injustice in your life, it would probably be that some people still think that you bit Tree Rollins during that skirmish when everybody knows that Tree is the one that bit you.
I think there was just a tweet out there today. Someone at work showed me that today. They go, "Is today the anniversary of biting Tree Rollins biting?" I go, no. But there was a tweet, something about.
Really?
He goes, the only reason I'm sending this tweet is just to clarify that Danny got bit by Tree Rollins. And I remember the headlines the next day in the Boston paper, and it said, "Tree bites man."
I remember it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
You got in a few skirmishes over the years. When you look back, was there one that you got in where you go, I shouldn't have got in this one? This is one where I need my teammates to get me out of it.
not really. I mean, I felt like they were all worthy. I mean, I shouldn't have got into them because I might have been like 1-6 in the fight card after the ones I got in. But the Tree one was funny because I was feeling bad about it, but he was cheap shotting, and he's a great guy, and everybody that played with him loved Tree. So I'm not bashing Tree, but it's just that kind of a game. It's a big playoff game, and he knocks out Quinn Buckner
Before he hit
in
you.
the game. Yeah, before I came back in the game. So he was getting us like with elbows and fouls. And so when he got me running down the court and hit me with that elbow, like I felt like I had to do something. I had to like run or like go tackle him.
You were smart because you went right for his knees.
Yeah. And by the way, like we should have used, like BYU's football team should use that tackle video.
Yes.
Like this is how you
It's a
tackle.
teaching
That's how you bring
video.
down a
Yeah,
beast.
It's a teaching video.
That
This
was
is
a
like,
good fundamentals.
It was good.
It was excellent. Head
then-
up. He saw what he hit. It was we should make a video of it.
It was interesting, too, because I watched it the other day. You're in this pile, and you're, I think, down at the bottom with Tree. And the next thing you know, Larry Bird's rolling in there. I'm not even sure what he was doing, but your teammates had your back. They were all in on that.
Yeah, so there was a fight earlier, and it was the Dr. J Larry Bird fight. So Larry was talking trash to Dr. J, which he didn't usually do. Talk to his the stars of the game.
I didn't know anyone talked trash to Dr.
Yeah,
J.
and but Larry said, I think Larry had like 35 halfway through the third quarter, and said to Dr. J, like, you need to retire, bro.
Oh, man.
And I don't think Dr. J took that too well. And he's like the nicest guy in the world, but they got in this fight, and but we're watching film of that fight, and one of our teammates wasn't involved in that fight. And Bird was visibly upset
Really?
at that moment.
That he didn't come to his
that one of our teammates, one of our regular players, wasn't in the mix, and that really did not settle with him. But yeah, he was always going to be there if there was a fight going on. He was going to be there to defend.
Is that like now? There's all these rules around it. I always say back in the day, but back when you were playing back, if you didn't go to defend if your teammate got in a fight, like you had to go defend him.
Yeah. It was,
and now the rules in college and the NBA, if you leave the bench, you're done. And so
can't leave the bench. If you're on the court, you can go try to break it up. But yeah,
it's not the same. It's not the good old days. They can't just duke it out like the good old days. I was mad. Do you remember? I don't know if you watched this, Danny. Brian will remember it for sure. But when Zach Wilson just got mugged at Coastal Carolina for no reason, like the play's over and
just
two
took
dudes,
him down, like
two dudes, and they're
Yeah.
throwing him down and doing all that. I was visibly angry that the entire team didn't run out and beat the crap out of those
the
two
ref
guys.
was watching it.
The ref just let it go. But I was mad that the team, because I have this old school mentality, like why was the entire offensive line not down there beating the crap out of those two guys?
Well, I agree with you. But what about the late hit penalty on the court or roughing the passer this week? The guy just barely got tackled.
Yeah, what's a tackle anymore?
He didn't even swing him down.
No, it was unbelievable.
Yeah,
that was a huge play. But yeah, the game, they're getting soft.
Yeah,
for sure.
it's not
I
like
was gonna say on that Tree Rollins thing. What happened was I got in this fight with Tree Rollins. I wasn't happy that I got in this fight, but I was feeling a little down. That was on a Sunday afternoon televised game, and so I get a phone call the next day from Marvin J. Ashton, who was close to us. I mean, he married Michelle and I in Salt Lake Temple, and he goes, the brethren and I talked about your incident yesterday in the game, and he said, the only thing we would have done different is we'd have gone after him a lot sooner than you did.
I love that.
That sounds like something Elder Perry would say as well. There were some guys that were into sports.
We were
That's awesome.
When Devin was on, we were talking about a play where Elder Perry, Devin had gone to the bucket, finished at the rim, and then turned around and run back. And I think they were playing Notre Dame at BYU. And a guy forwarded him right in the face and knocked him to the ground, almost knocked him out. And the cameras kind of went over because Coach was up now. And then there's large man stood up in the front row and leaned over, and you could see in his lips, he said, "What's wrong with you, ref? Are you blind?" And then a woman's hand came up on his shoulder and sat him down out of the picture. And then we asked him about it later, and he goes, "Yeah, that was me. And my wife told me that was not, that's not how I should conduct myself. So I've got to do way better."
I have to do that with President Santiago.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Steve Cleveland sent us a note of an incident we're going to talk about.
So we might have to bring that up.
On the bench. For back in your time in Boston, you were also serving as a bishop in your ward. And we were kicking it back and forth, fascinated, because we've all been in these kind of scenarios. And I was thinking how the young men responded to an interview with you as the bishop, who's also running the beloved franchise in the area. Did you find that they were on time more, that they listened to you more, that they did what you said?
We had great young men. It was like, they were the easy part of the bishoping part.
Really?
Yeah, the priest quorum and the young men, they were the easy part. Yeah, but I was surrounded by great people. As like that's the only way you can get through those callings, especially when you have a busy life. But that was a great experience. Yeah.
That had to have been your street cred amongst the youth in the ward had to be skyrocketing, because we see it all the time with different types. But someone who's running the beloved team as they're winning championships, I just think that the youth would think that was pretty cool.
They might have thought but I think they were I was just a normal bishop to them, most of them.
Yeah.
Danny and I were talking the other night about, he was telling me about this great idea, and we won't get all into it, but I said, we should start a not-for-profit to help these kids. And Danny's like, Blaine, we're old. Kids don't listen to us anymore.
I was like, come on, man. I don't feel like we're that old.
They still listen, but you're right. It might take like 9 times.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to talk, your career wound down, phenomenal playing career. One of the all-time greats, clearly one of the all-time greats in BYU history, if not the greatest player that ever played here. And then it's into coaching and then into management. And in the roles that you've played as an executive, you have to make a lot of tough decisions. And we were noting that you traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett away from the Celtics last summer. You traded Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert away. Despite what the general public thinks, they're all screaming and, second guessing. Both trades designed to make your teams better. How did you learn to have that toughness in this role where you can kind of just focus and not worry about what the public says and do what's best for the team and make those tough calls? I've
just been scrutinized as a player for so many years. I have pretty thick skin. I don't know if I always had thick skin, but I certainly developed thick skin. But trading away good players is always hard. But it's not because of the media scrutiny. It's hard because the relationships that you develop with the people. So with Paul and KG, it was, it wasn't as hard because they were older and they were going together. And, they had a chance to win, probably more than our team was going to have a chance to win that year. So I had to convince KG. He renegotiated his contract with Brooklyn, and I think he was all in once that all settled in. But it wasn't easy, but it was easy to do because it was a no-brainer choice for our franchise. And that actually goes back to, I remember one year I was with Red Auerbach at a Christmas dinner, and McHale and Bird were there, and they were both injured. And this was like 1988, and Christmas of 88. And sitting around the table, and I go, Red, are you telling me you could get Detlef Schrempf and Sam Perkins and Dale Ellis for Kevin McHale right now? And these guys were all young players in the league. And he goes, yeah, I probably could. And I go, and you're not doing it? And Kevin was sitting right here. Kevin's one of my best friends even to this day. And I go, and you could get Chuck Person and Herb Williams and Steve Stepanovich for Larry Bird right now? You go, he's got 2 Achilles tendon surgeries. Like, why are we not doing that? And I thought, we could restack the whole team. And I always wondered about that. But yeah, it wasn't the first time I had trade discussions about Paul and KG, but there was nothing tempting ever. I was going to let them retire as Celtics, but when Brooklyn came along, it was like an absolute no-brainer, something that I had to convince people, this is what we have to do, even Paul and KG. Donovan and Rudy was different because I'm coming into a new organization. This is not me. I'm just a chain link for Ryan. I'm to look at the blind spots that they may have as they're making these decisions. As without Dennis Lindsay, who was such a prominent and really good general manager for so many years, that I'm just a link in the chain of the decision-making process, and I'm just helping make that decision. But it was unanimous decisions of these were things for all the different various reasons that we had, that it wasn't me coming in and going, we got to do this. We got to get, I watched Donovan since he was 16. I don't want to trade Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah. But look what you got for him.
Yeah. I mean, it was good, but guys like Donovan are hard to find.
Yeah.
And, we're very fortunate that Lowry's turned out to be really good. Colin has played really well for us. And, we got some assets to try to continue to build.
When you have those kind of assets, and we asked Jimmer if he had a question for you when he was with us last week. He said, ask Danny what he's going to do with the Jazz the rest of the season. But when you have those assets over the next handful of years, you really have an opportunity to do so many different things. And most teams don't have the freedom that you created in a short period of time.
Well, yeah, I mean, coming to the Jazz just a little over a year ago, they didn't really have any. They had sold out and were trying to win, and I can't say that was a wrong decision, but they didn't have any assets really to trade. And so I asked all the guys as we're sitting there on draft day, I go, is this fun? You got all these different players
picks,
again,
right?
No picks, no really opportunities to do anything. And then free agency came along a week later, and I go, are we having fun yet? We're over the tax. We don't have any, and you can't get into the repeater tax unless you have a championship caliber team. So, these were discussions and conversations I was having as I was getting to know the Jazz front office, who are a lot of great people that Dennis and Quinn hired, and I'd be stupid to get rid of them, and they're outstanding people. So it's been fun getting to know them.
Well, it's going to be fun to watch because with assets, that's how you build a franchise and get competitive. And I know your ultimate goal, and I know Ryan's is as well, to win a world championship. Is that possible here?
Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it was possible. It's hard to win it anywhere. Winning in the NBA is challenging. Winning playoff series is hard. But yeah, winning is going to be difficult for sure.
Speaking of difficult winning, BYU goes to the Big 12 next year, and you've evaluated talent for a long time. As you evaluate the Big 12, in what areas does BYU have to get better just to compete?
So I think BYU can compete, even with the team they have now. It's just a matter of consistency. I think that Big 12, you just don't have a day off.
Yeah.
You don't lose to Gonzaga by 1 point one night and
Get
then
Pepperdine.
and get Pepperdine the next night. You got Iowa State and you got TCU and you got Houston, and I mean it doesn't end. And the Big 12 is the best basketball conference in basketball right now for sure.
Yeah. It'll be fun, but you're right. I don't know if the fans are ready. I think the fans are going to be exhausted through next season if they have to bring it every night, because they're good about selling out the place for Gonzaga and St. Mary's, and the others are, well, we'll go to the game if we have time.
I think that's going to be bringing excitement, though. You got to look at it different. I mean, the WCC is completely different than the Big 12, and there will be an adjustment period. But I mean, it all depends on the talent that you get. And but I think Mark Pope has done a good job with the team, and guys compete at a very high level. I thought that the Creighton game was, except for the last minute and a half or 2 minutes, it was unbelievable performance. The Utah performance was great. Gonzaga the other night was amazing until just the very end. And, it took them to make a couple of great shots in transition to beat us. But I think it's fun watching the team play. And so if you got more Gonzagas and more St. Mary's, and that's what we're going to have in the Big 12, I think it's going to it's going to train our team and the organization and our fans and everybody to be ready. You got to play. You got to be ready to play every night.
Last question for you before Blaine hits you up with 5 quick ones. When you look back over your life and you remember UCLA telling you weren't fast enough to be with the Bruins, which leads you to BYU, and then everything that's happened to you since that, with your personal life and your career and all leading up to tonight, when you see the stars of how your life's been connected from one thing to another, can you doubt a higher power that said, Danny, this is your course?
Oh, I've never doubted that. It was, I wasn't planning on going to BYU. It was Marvin J. Ashton had come to my home, or come to our stake, and I had requested a meeting with me. And he, as you guys know, he was a big U of U guy. And U of U was recruiting me at the time as well. And but anyway, he said to me, he says, if you are worthy, going to BYU, you should at least look into it. I'm not going to tell you where you should go to school, but you should at least make a visit there. And so I probably wouldn't have made the visit had he not brought that up. My brother had come to BYU, didn't work out. I had some experience at BYU, but not much. But yeah, I was all about the Pac-8 in those days, and it was big-time basketball. Oregon State were powerhouses. Washington was a national powerhouse, and but
UCLA was UCLA.
But my experience on a recruiting trip at BYU changed my whole life.
What happened?
So we were, first of all, so Scott Runya and Greg Anderson were the guys that were taking me out. And I think the first thing we did was we went to a movie, and Mark Handy was a senior, and he had played with my brother, but he got in a snowball fight with a couple of guys that were throwing snowballs at his truck, and so that was fun. And then we went over.
Welcome to Provo.
Yeah, then we went over to the dorms, and I met Alan Taylor, who was a year ahead of us. He was Scott Runya's age and Greg Anderson's age, and he was on probation, because he threw a kid out the second floor of his dorm window.
That's frowned upon.
Yeah.
And I said, why did you do that? And he said, the kid, got my homework wet. And I go, okay, that justifies that then. And so this fight, and then I meet Alan Taylor, who's
and this is how your visit's going.
And this is those are guys I want to play with.
These are regular dudes. I like these
regular
guys.
dudes. And so, and then we went home, and Scott Runya and Greg Anderson, they had borrowed 4 snowmobiles, and we were going to Strawberry Reservoir the next morning. And a big snowstorm came that night, and they called the campus police on themselves as they got in their snowmobiles and were riding around campus trying to ditch the campus cops.
No kidding.
It was hilarious. I go, these are my kind of people. Anyway, so the next day we went on a snowmobile trip, and we were racing across Strawberry, and I went off of a 10-foot cliff, and the handlebar went right into my chest, hit me in the face. I fell down, was unconscious. Blood was coming out of my head, and the guys were up top. They thought I was dead, laying on the ground of the snow. And they ended up taking me, and I had stitches put in above my eye. And that night, after I got back, got stitches and made sure I was okay. Probably had a concussion, but anyway, that night was a baptism of Mike May.
Okay.
And I think that baptism probably touched me more than anything in my life up to that point, for sure. And by the time I got home from that visit, just all of the experiences, but the coaches, the campus, the professors, the players, I had never really been around, other LDS kids that were like them. And they were just a lot more normal like me from what, my experience had been. So anyway, I was very excited to go play there. And of course, 22,000 people in the Marriott Center doesn't hurt.
It's a great environment. It was a great environment when Danny was playing. Believe me, I was sitting up there watching it.
Did you hit any jumps over by the Smoot building on your snowmobile or any of that stuff?
You weren't riding around town.
I wasn't
with those
riding
guys,
around
right?
town. They did that.
Oh, those guys, you weren't with them on that.
I wasn't. I was in the house while they did it, so I was
Okay.
witnessing it. But I was like, going, "This is hilarious."
And the great lesson that Danny's teaching right now too is this, though. You go play. There's a lot of places you can play, but you go play where you fit in and feel comfortable and feel like you're going to be part of a culture and an atmosphere that's going to make you better and all of that. It sounds like that's how you made your decision, is where you felt comfortable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had been on many recruiting trips, and I won't say the school, but I mean, there's one school I go there, and like the two best players are trying to sell me cocaine. Just in contrast, it was a different time. It was, but I obviously didn't want to go there,
Right.
and play that. Obviously, they didn't get a memo of who they're bringing in for a recruiting trip.
No.
But the BYU experience, it's changed my life forever. I've never once doubted that was the right call.
Fantastic. What a story.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to hit him up with 5 quick questions?
So we just do these 5 quick questions.
And we got Brian on the clock, and he's getting
Yep.
antsy, so we got to
So-
get him in here.
So, and you don't even think about them. You just answer them. First thing that comes to your head. Your favorite sports movie?
Remember the Titans.
Nice.
It's one of my favorite football, but I mean, Chariots of Fire.
Oh, that's a great one too. Hey, you know what? Is that
They
our
had a
first,
sports
that's our
book. I
first
think that's a
Chariots of
sport.
Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is our first Chariots of Fire.
See, this is Danny's not.
What about Bad News Bears?
Bad
that's
News
a-
Bears.
that's a
Which one?
true-
The old school one
No,
or the new
the
one?
I think
old one.
Walter Matthau,
Yeah.
Bad
Yes.
News Bears with the shortstop Tanner. I have a son named Tanner, and
Yeah.
I was all excited because of the personality on Bad News Bears.
Oh man.
Kid that got in fights with everybody.
Wouldn't leave the field. That guy's classic.
See, you didn't go with the standard basketball guy answer of Hoosiers, which is
I
great.
mean, Hoosiers might be my favorite basketball movie.
Yeah, it's great, but I love
classic.
Chariots of Fire as a
I
classic.
think Marie Osmond's was Hoosiers.
Yeah,
right
Maurice
out of
was
the gate.
Hoosiers.
Yeah.
So,
Hoosiers is tough to beat.
yep. Favorite singer or band?
I'm a country music guy. I mean, I grew up on the Beatles and Rolling Stones. I liked as a kid, but I think, and I still listen to a lot of music from the 70s and 80s, but I'm a country music guy. And so I would probably say
Garth Brooks.
I thought you were going to
Yes.
go Keith Urban on that.
No,
What,
Garth Brooks.
Okay.
Brenda's going to say, see, hon, Danny's got it. He knows Garth Brooks because I'm like, grew up in New York, so I'm like a hip hop kid. She's like, what's wrong with you?
I was interviewing Garth Brooks one time, and I asked him, I said, do you still get nervous? And he had just sold out 4 shows up in Salt Lake. And he goes, I get nervous every single night. I go, really? He goes, I'll be honest with you. Every time before I come out behind the curtain, I think to myself, what if no one's there? I go, seriously, you've sold them all. He goes, it doesn't matter. Those feelings of I'm about to come out, what if no one's there? It's interesting how entertainers think.
Right.
Yeah. He's
one of the best.
He's like, yeah, I finally got good enough that I could actually hire a real guitar player instead of playing it myself. Like, it's just like, he's the best. So, favorite breakfast cereal?
I mean, I'm a shredded wheat guy with I'm a shredded wheat.
Wait,
guy.
do you do the frosted though? Please tell me do the frosted.
I don't do the frosted. I mean, as a kid, probably it was Lucky Charms. But,
Okay, now we're talking.
But I think as an adult, it's been more non-frosted wheat.
That's like healthy.
That's totally against the trend of the show.
It's my
healthy.
wife. It's my wife. That's really all we have.
So
in the
Michelle's
house.
had a good
Just
influence
shredded
on
wheat?
you. This is shredded wheat.
She puts lots
Michelle,
of berries
can
on
you
it.
please get Danny some Lucky
It's just like
Charms?
serving up hay. It's like serving up some hay.
As we're getting old. We have to have something.
Well, we
that,
spice it out. We spice the shredded wheat out.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Your favorite moment with Charles Barkley?
Favorite moment? Wow, we had a lot of fun moments. I think was when we were in the conference finals and beating San Antonio and Charles hitting a jump shot to win it. But you know, I played 3 years with Charles, and he made me laugh every day, every single day, as you guys can imagine.
Yes.
But maybe my favorite moment was this just shows you how much players are going to control. But we have our owner Jerry Colangelo there, and who's got a lot of clout as an owner, and we have the whole team and players are there, and I got one of the story I just thought of. It's too good to pass up.
Okay.
So Charles, we're taking a team photo before the game, and so we get up there and they're setting the stage for an hour, getting ready for this big team photo of the Phoenix Suns, and they click like 3 pictures, and Charles goes, "We're done." And they go, no, we got a lot more. We got more lenses. He goes, "No, we're done. Like, I'm in charge, not you, and we're done." And he just walked away, and there was no more pictures. It's got 3 takes. You guys, better find one there. And then there's a day where Paul Westphal, so our tip-off is 7:10 in Phoenix, and we're all sitting around. It's 30 minutes before tip-off. Everybody's always there. We all kind of stretching, look up at Charles. His uniform's still there, so he hasn't arrived to the arena yet. And so we're just sitting there for another 5 or 10 minutes. We're watching, the pregame film, and no one's saying a word. Finally, Westphal gets up and says, "If he's not here by 7:10, he's not starting."
By 7:10? But if he's not here by tip, he is not starting.
Did he make it?
He made it. Yeah, he
man.
made it. But Westphal knew who was in charge.
That's
Oh, it's
exactly
funny.
right. So,
Charles in charge.
So the last one is, what's a favorite piece of advice you ever got from your dad?
Oh, my dad, wow. I got so much good advice, but, my dad I used to drive up to him in Portland. He'd work like 1 day a week in Portland, which was like a 2-hour drive each way. And, but I remember one time he was trying to teach me about balance. And, he said, "You need to have balance in your life." I go, "Dad, I'm balanced. I play baseball, football, basketball, golf."
The 4 seasons.
And track. And we opened the 252 where it says Jesus increased in wisdom, stature, and in favor with God and man. And I've never forgotten that. And that was a driving thing for me throughout my life.
To keep balance. That's a good one.
That's
a great
awesome.
one.
The great Danny Ainge with us. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate being able to visit and
When we started this thing, this is what we envisioned, because in our normal jobs, and normally when you get interviewed, we got a 4-minute soundbite or a 6-minute soundbite. We never just get together with friends and just get to hang out and reminisce, and we sure appreciate you doing it with us. It's so fun.
I'm excited that I'm being run out of the table by B. Sand.
B. Sand.
He's getting anxious.
He's ended some good days for me here and
Yes.
there throughout the years. But
I'll tell you, as a 12-year-old boy, and I've told you this before, as a ball boy, 7th grader from Lake Ridge Junior High, but a ball boy for the team, and I'd rebound for you before these games, and you're the big star on campus, and I'm just a punk kid that I'm pretty sure I got ball boy because of my dad was running the Cougar Club. But I remember you just always asked me about my day and kind of grill me on girls and my life in 7th grade, and that's where I learned. And now we have kids, and we've seen that with others. Is that the impact that an athlete can have on somebody else just by giving them the time of day. And so that took place in 1979, but it's still important to me, even though to you, I was just one of the 22,000 in the house that day. It's just interesting how we do that.
I've always liked kids. I still I love talking with the kids. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Danny Ainge with us.
Danny, thanks so much.
You bet.
We're gonna have you
to
turn
see
the
you, brother.
microphone over to the man right here, Brian Santiago. The great Danny Ainge. Next week, Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator, will be with us, and Trent Pratt, the baseball coach. Gordon Eakin will join us 2 weeks from tonight.
Hey, and speaking of baseball, Danny's the headliner next week at BYU Baseball's first pitch fundraising event in Provo, Friday, January 27th at the New Skin Building in Provo, right?
Yeah, and tickets, you can go to sportscamps at byu.edu to get some seats to that. I don't know if he's going to tell baseball stories, golf stories, basketball stories, or football
do it all.
stories, but there will be stories there on that first pitch event. It's a great fundraiser for the baseball team. Our next guest won a state championship at Provo High School and played college basketball and baseball at Utah Valley and basketball at Fresno State. He finished the 1993-94 season with the Bulldogs' record in assists with 233 and was second in the nation, hitting 50% of his three-point shots. In 2002, he was inducted into the Utah Valley Athletic Hall of Fame. Currently the Deputy Athletic Director at BYU. It is our pleasure to welcome Brian Santiago to the Wise Guys. We've been trying to get you in here for about 4 months. Tonight is the night. Welcome.
I got to call the games when he played even, right? And when I lived at the Whittingham's house, these guys lived right behind me. And so his dad.
That's a whole show right there, I have a feeling.
Brian's dad used to kind of make sure, because Fred and Nancy had moved down to L.A., and it was just the boys. It was just Kyle and Carrie and I.
That sounds like a good idea.
And then Kyle Morrell, which that combo right there is not a good thing. And Brother Santiago is a dear soul that I love very much for kind of keeping us in line and making sure we went to church. And he got a little mad at Carrie and I one night when I think it was a 22 where there was like a wood wall behind the pool between us and you, and we put targets up on the wall and we were shooting the gun into the wall, and your dad came over and told us that wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, that sounds about right. There was a lot that went on at that home that everybody's alive.
Everybody
lived, and you want to know what? We all landed on our feet. Well, Kyle Morrell's not alive.
Yeah, that's true.
Because Kyle ALS got Kyle, our good friend. But I'm telling you, if it wasn't for the Santiago family, we probably would have run amok a little more than we did.
Yeah, it's nice to be here with you guys.
Good to have you here. Danny just left, but I wanted to ask you, in a free throw shooting contest to 20, who wins, you or him?
No question, me.
To 20? How many do you get?
He would tell you the same thing, 20.
He'd tell you 20?
And I'm not so sure.
Here's the thing. He'd make 22. He would make 20 also. If we
You'd have to go
20,
into bonus time to beat him?
It'd go to bonus. It'd take a while.
Did you see Tyler the other night on the fundraising thing? He missed the first, then he made 15 straight.
Yeah, but he would have lost.
Yeah, because he missed the first. He couldn't settle in.
If you're on the first tee over at Riverside, who hits the longest drive, you or Danny?
It depends.
Hey,
on the wind or
no,
what?
It just depends. It just depends on if he tees his ball up too close to the tee marker and hits the tee marker.
He told us that you are, how should we say this, liberal with your scorekeeping.
Yeah. We were telling him, he said that we told him that Governor Herbert, when we play with him, gives us governor's pardons. We get shots over again. He goes, Brian takes a governor's pardon anytime he wants, whether he's playing with the governor or not.
Just consider the source. That's all I'm saying. Consider the source. One thing about golf is, and I really believe this, it's one of the purest games on planet Earth. And I will always say it's one of the reasons I love it is because it actually is a game of honor.
It really is.
Especially when you get into good competitive matches. And I actually am someone that doesn't think there's any room for any sort of out of bounds in golf.
There's no teammate. There's no. You can't blame anybody. You can't.
You check yourself. It's so competitive because of the handicap system.
Yep. Yeah.
It keeps everybody in it. You play. It's the matches. We've just had some of the most unbelievable matches. I don't know if he told you. We have an ongoing score.
No, he didn't say that.
We for years and years we've played so many. Now there is some question on what the overall record is. And we differ on opinion there. But since he's been back in Utah, since he moved to Utah, for a minute or two, I had the lead.
The overall lead.
The overall lead. I think he's now surpassed me by one or two.
Like how many games, how many matches is this now? Is it in the hundreds and hundreds?
It's got to be 100.
That's awesome.
But it's awesome. And people don't know this, but you said something at the end there that's the reality. Danny Ainge is one of the best human beings that you'll ever find.
Yeah.
And he invests in kids even today that it's unbelievable. I'll tell you two quick stories. People don't know when he was playing at BYU, he and Steve Trumbo, I showed up to my first junior jazz practice, and they introduced us to our coaches, Steve Trumbo and Danny Ainge. So Ainge was my coach as a little kid, and
No kidding.
kind of took me in.
And they were volunteering, right?
Oh, they just come from practice, and the first thing we start playing a little bit, the first thing he pulls me over and he said, "Hey, every time you get the ball, I want you to shoot it."
So that's where it started.
That's where it started. Field goal attempts, FGAs, baby.
You saw that green light from Danny Ainge.
He called me Santa. Santa, when you get it, you shoot it. You do not pass. You shoot it. And then he took me in. He would bring me in the locker room after games.
That's great.
And so we started a friendship when I was 8, 9
Wow.
years old. And
That's something.
he's always been friendly to me. And then just a week or so ago, he was down in Vegas at the G League showcase. And my buddy calls me and goes, "Yo, Ainge has come to every one of my kids' games the last 3 days." And we're all golfing buddies.
Yeah.
But he comes to the games, and then afterwards, he takes my kid aside and starts talking to him about the game and helping him.
Huh.
He goes, "Is this guy for real?"
He
And
is for real,
I said,
right?
"That's no." I said, "You don't understand. That's Danny Ainge.
Yeah.
He
I know.
shows
I get
up.
that feeling
He
from
cares.
being 12.
He cares about people. He follows up. He's been unbelievable influence for good with my own children, and as good as he is as a GM, one of the best in the world, is one of the most respected guys in the game of basketball. He's just a real guy. I mean, sit over there and laugh.
He's a star in every
in
every part of his life.
He just gets it.
So.
All right, so that closes the chapter on our guest, Danny Ainge. Now the spotlight's on you.
Yeah, I have to tell you about this guy because he was a very, very good shooter in college. So that's just a given. He can still shoot it. So I actually I called one of his most recent games. Did you remember this? So it was a 3-on-3 tournament. He and Ryan Smith are playing, have a team in. And Ryan asked me if I would come. And it was a celebration of our dear friend Clayton Riggs that passed away. And we were having an annual 3-on-3 tournament. And he's a good friend of Ryan's and a good friend of Brian's. But who else? It was you and Ryan, and who was your third? I can't even remember who the third was.
I don't know, somebody that was supposed to pass it.
Yeah, it was supposed to pass. And
The assist man. It's like the bag man.
And this guy was still taking Danny's advice.
Shooting every time?
Shooting, and he can still knock down threes from as far as you want to step back. I know we call it Jimmer range now, but back in the day it was Brian Santiago range.
It was Santa range.
It's still Brian Santiago range.
It's good. We've had some epic shootouts.
And that was fun. And they won it, by the way. He and Ryan and a guy they picked up won the 3-on-3 tournament. And they played in some good teams.
We've had some epic shootouts through the years with Jimmer and I had one right before the San Diego State BYU game when we were both ranked in the top 5.
Who won it?
I was dressed like this, took off my jacket. We played a game where if you get up 2, so if I shoot 1 and you shoot 1, if I make it and you miss, I'm up 1.
Right.
So it took about 170 shots from the 3-point line. We probably both combined missed 6 or 7, 8 shots.
Yeah.
And I had 2 shots to close him out in the 150s and missed them both.
That's nice. You took one for the team so he'd have his confidence.
And then he beat me. It still bothers me to this day.
Sounds
but
like
the
it.
next day was one of the great epic performances of all time BYU basketball history. Everybody had been doubting Jimmer and Jackson, those guys all day. And Jimmer
So you felt you'd help prepare him?
I prepared him.
And which game was it?
At San Diego
Oh,
State.
down there
Down
in
there.
VA Hospital.
Unbelievable.
CBS.
That was something.
At Fresno State, you go 1-3 against the Cougars, 92-93 and 93-94, those 2 seasons. What was your best game amongst those 4 against BYU? You won in 93, 73-68.
Yeah.
That was at your place in Fresno.
We beat them twice that year.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm 100% positive.
I went to the Fresno records for this.
Yeah, it's inaccurate. We beat them because we beat them in the regular season at Fresno, and then we beat them in the NIT.
Oh, you know
Oh,
what?
maybe
They
I didn't
have
go
the NIT. They looked
down.
at the regular season.
Yeah.
record.
We beat them in the NIT.
I stand correct.
So they were 2-3 then that season again.
So
those two
we
seasons.
played them. Yeah, we played them 4 times that season. They beat us in Provo. They beat us in Salt Lake in the conference tournament, and then we beat them both times down there. But my best game was one of my best weekends in my college career. Utah came to town on Thursday night, back in the great WAC,
the
weekends.
16 team
It just
thing.
you're playing two. It was like the old WAC. It was New Mexico and UTEP. It was Colorado State and Wyoming. It was
BYU,
Utah. And Utah.
Yeah.
It was just epic. So
CSU Air Force.
Yep. Utah came in on Thursday night. I had a triple-double, one of the few that they've ever had at Fresno State. Went 25, 11, and 10. Majerus got thrown out of the arena. It was a beautiful night.
It's a win-win.
And then BYU came in a couple nights later, and I almost had a second triple-double. I had 11 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists, I think, and we beat them.
Why didn't you play here?
It's a great question, and a lot of people have asked me that through the years. My brothers played at BYU. I had a great relationship with the coaching staff at BYU, and it actually was a turning point for me. Opened some significant doors. I wouldn't be at BYU now had I not made the decision to go to Fresno, but I was coming to BYU. We had talked with Bradley, with Ken Roberts, obviously Randy Reed and the others. We were going to make a run at it. We'd all grown up saying, hey, at some point we're going to end up
all be
there.
together at BYU, right?
And I was on my mission, came back from my mission thinking that I would either come straight over to BYU or play another year for Duke Reed, who was Roger's brother over at Utah Valley.
Yeah.
And I went back to Utah Valley, and about 2 or 3 weeks in, a guy by the name of Gary Colson came into the gym. He was the longtime New Mexico coach, was the head coach of Fresno
Gary.
State.
Yep.
And he walked up to me and just said, hey, I know you're a BYU guy, but I want you to come to Fresno and just spend a couple of days. I know you're going to BYU. Just come spend a couple of days with me at Fresno. And at the time, I'm like, yeah, I'll take a little weekend trip to Fresno.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
What harm could come from that?
So I went. And while I was there, started to pay a little bit of attention to the people. They brought out all of including Steve Cleveland. He was over at a barbecue. They had Sherm Sobey.
And Steve at the time, was he at Fresno City College
He was
at the
at
time?
Fresno City College.
Right.
And so they brought out a bunch of the LDS brass in Fresno, members of the church, to kind of help make me feel comfortable. But I was just on a little weekend joy. I mean, I wasn't going to Fresno State. But something interesting happened. And my dad and mom, who I revere, had always told me to make sure that I paid attention and followed my feelings.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the back of a car with a couple of the players and riding down Blackstone Avenue, enjoying the food. Everybody that knows me knows I love food. And in fact, on one of the breakfasts of the recruiting trip, Gary Colson looked at me and said, B, I'm recruiting you to play basketball, not football. I had the
like this.
omelet, I had the pancakes, I had all of it. But I was in the back of a car driving down the street, Blackstone Avenue, still remember exactly where I was. And I had a very, very strong impression that I needed to go to Fresno State. And it caught me off guard. And so I started to pay attention, started to listen to what coaches were talking about. I started to notice, the Red Wave had a huge following.
Yeah.
But I really started to listen and started asking some questions. And I never told anybody that while I was down there. But I came home, and my mom and dad said, hey, how'd it go? And I just said, hey, I had a great experience. And I had a funny thing happen. And I told them what had happened. I'd had this really strong impression that I needed to go to Fresno State. And my dad looked at me and said, B, you need to follow your feelings. And you need to do that. And so I actually took a picture in a Fresno State jersey that they had sent with me and spinning a ball, and I sent it to him in the mail. I sent it to Coach Colson, and he got it, and I didn't send any note with it. I actually wrote on it and said, once a Bulldog, Provo Bulldog, always a Bulldog.
Bulldog to Bulldog.
Mm-hmm. And he didn't know what to do, so he called the Reeds and said, hey, I just got a picture of Santiago spinning a ball on his finger in a Fresno State jersey. It said, once a Bulldog, always a Bulldog. Do you know anything about it? And Duke Reed came out on the floor and said, hey, what's going on? And I said,
During a game.
no, this was in practice.
In practice.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I committed to Fresno State. I'm going to go to Fresno State. That's the right thing for me. And he just said, no, I need you to go over and talk to Roger. I need you to.
Yeah.
This
It's a family deal.
Okay. And I just said, Coach, I said, you got to trust me. This is the right thing for me. And we talked about it later. But I went on and had a great year at Utah Valley. And I literally got home a day before the school year started. It was probably 20 pounds overweight, but
From your mission?
From my mission, but I averaged.
Played yourself into shape, and
I averaged 20 points. I think gave 9 assists a game. I shot 50% from the 3-point line. Had a great year and played myself into shape, and then things started coming together, and I had a great experience at Fresno State.
That's fascinating. It leads right into this next question, and we'll get to your current role and the Big 12 and all that stuff coming up, so hang on, folks. But Steve Cleveland's hired as head coach at BYU in 1997. You go to his house and make the pitch to him that he needs to bring you with him.
Yeah.
Why did you feel that at that moment this job coming to Provo and to get involved with BYU was so important?
Well, looking back, Cleve was a really positive influence in my life in Fresno. I taught his son in seminary. Steve Cleveland was super good to me.
Yeah.
And it was actually Gary Colson that called me on the phone. I was at work in Fresno. I'd come back from playing in Puerto Rico. Been playing down there for 2 or 3 years. Thought I was going to play in the Olympics till I got hurt. And I was back in Fresno working, and my phone rang, and it was Gary Colson who said, I'm calling Steve Cleveland. You need to go with him to BYU. And that was the moment where I just thought, wow, because I hadn't really thought about it. Interestingly enough, I was one of the ones that knew Cleve was involved with the job. We had never talked about me being involved with him. I just knew, and then he had told me, hey, I'm going to Provo tomorrow. I'm going to be introduced to the new coach. Then I got that call from Colson saying, you need to go with him. So anyways, long story short, I couldn't eat or drink for about 3 or 4 weeks. I was just like, wow, that's super intriguing. I'd really like to get my master's degree. That'd be an unbelievable opportunity. I'm from Provo. I kind of know the lay of the land. I can, have Cleve's back. But in my mind, I started to make sense to me. So I did. I went over to his house.
Yeah.
Said, come over. Rose was at his house at the time, Coach Rose, and we just started talking. And even then, it wasn't like, hey, because at the time.
Because he wasn't even sure.
Well, they didn't have a position.
Right.
There were, back in the day, you didn't have an ops person.
Yeah, there wasn't a director of basketball operations.
You just had the coaches. And he had already talked about who he was going to have on his staff. But then he said, I'm going to talk to him about hiring a director of basketball operations. Time I think it was an administrative assistant or something, and then that process took a while, and there was a vice president at the time that kind of pushed it through. And if you remember the name Dwayne Busby,
oh yeah,
it was just such a great part of BYU football, and so close with Lavell and Kalani. But Dwayne and I came in at the same time. They approved a position for football and basketball, and Dwayne and I came in at the same time.
And you and Steve shared an office.
We not only shared an office, but I think I had 2 or 3 jobs at the time trying to make ends meet. I was going to business school.
Yeah.
I was sharing an office with him. There were a couple of times where I was like, hey, Steve, could you step out of the office?
I got to make a call for my other job.
I got to, but I say this with respect. It only could have worked because of the relationship we had.
Yeah.
Type of person he is. He was so good to me and treated me like I was like right in the middle of it. And he's the one that really opened all the doors for me to where I'm currently at. And I'll always have just a great amount of love and appreciation for Cleve.
We reached out to him today.
Yes.
Some of you are coming on, and we said, hey, what do you have anything for us to share? And he sent us this.
He said, he goes, hey, no one's, Cleve.
Yeah.
Like, we all love Cleve, by the way.
He's listening tonight. Hey, Steve.
He says, no one is more passionate or competitive than B. He would usually sit at the end of the bench nearest the scorekeeper. He'd start barking at the officials, opposing players, and was generally wound up. I don't remember the game, but I do remember losing my mind and yelling at B to get to the end of the bench. Then I yelled at Dave Rose to make sure he stayed there. He says he got better, But he still had his moments at the end of the bench yelling at the officials.
Hey, listen, sometimes those officials needed a little something. And
do you know what game? Do you know what he's talking about?
I know exactly what he's talking about.
What
we were
is
actually in Hawaii.
So he does remember.
I know exactly where it was. We were in Hawaii, and we were playing in a tournament over there at BYU Hawaii, and it was actually Terrell Day was playing, and
what was the Rainbow Classic or something?
No, it was BYU Hawaii.
Okay.
Had some sort of a tournament there, and we were playing at BYU Hawaii's campus, and Terrell stole the ball, and it had nothing to do with the officials. He stole the ball and had one of our guys out ahead of him, wide open. And by the way, Terrell Day is my guy, even to this day. We were texting during the Gonzaga game. One of the best players ever at BYU, by the way. Dude was a bucket. But he didn't pass the ball ahead and dribbled all the way down, gave time for the defense to come back. So as he's going, I'm yelling at him, pass it, pass it, pass the ball. And he dribbles all the way down. Guy kind of ends up fouling him and doesn't score the bucket and has to go to the free throw line. It would have been a layup. Well, Cleve didn't like it. So Cleve's like, hey, get down to the end of the bench. And I turn around and I'm like, yeah, I'll go to the end of the bench, but somebody tell him to pass the ball. Yelling just like that.
I love that he said to Dave Rose, hey, you get down there and make sure he stays down there too.
No, but it was good. But the best thing was after the game, Cleve came over to me and he goes, sorry, B. And I go, Coach, we're just all in this for one reason. That's we're in it for each other to help win games. And I said, I'm sorry that I was so passionate about it, but we got to play the game the right way. I mean, we were battling that first year. I mean, we won 9 games. It was heroic what happened. And but we were all so invested. I mean, you think about who was on the bench. You're talking about some of the most passionate people. Heath Schroyer.
Yeah.
Dave Rose.
Steve
myself.
Cleveland, you.
Nate Call. I mean, there wasn't a lack of passion on the bench.
It's a wonder we didn't set a school record for technical fouls.
So the best was I never got teed up. And back in you know how the coaches go out and talk?
Yeah.
Well, back in the day, the rules were the director of basketball operations couldn't be in that circle.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So while they'd go out and talk, I'd talk to the team. I'd get the team
get them fired up.
So before this guy comes back in here, let me tell you.
In here, this is, and we used to have some good.
See, Brian goes nuts about the same things. Like the other night in the game, the Pepperdine game, and this drives me nuts. Long rebound, outlet goes out. Now it's a 2-on-1, and the guy with the ball is slightly behind, and I'm like, advance the ball, get it up the floor. Like, give it up and get it back. Like, give it up, and you're going to get it back for a layup. Instead, the player, I'm not naming names, the player takes it all the way down the floor and shoots a contested layup against the one defender and misses. And the other team rebounds it. And we went to, and I'm very calm on the air, and they go to the break, and I just look at Dave, I'm like, what in the heck? Why doesn't he give up the ball?
I was taught to play the game the right way.
You give it up, and you're going to get it back.
Well, you're just playing the game the right way to win the game. And so from Provo High, Utah Valley to Fresno State, I was just always to Puerto Rico. I was just taught to play the game the right way, never a personal agenda. So I have issue when people have personal agendas on the court because the only thing that should matter is playing for each other and playing to win the game.
Amen.
Fast forward to Monday morning, July 23rd, last summer. Texas and Oklahoma drop a bombshell that they're leaving the Big 12 to join the SEC. What's the first thing that went through your mind?
We have a chance. They need us. That's the first thing that went through my mind. They need us.
Based on really nothing since the talks from 5 years ago, or had you heard things?
So no, what we had maintained when they had talks earlier, 5 years earlier, we had maintained that had they expanded, we were in. Mm-hmm. But we really believed that. We all know what happened. There were some deals made to maintain. They didn't need us at the time.
Right.
But when Texas and Oklahoma left, the first thing that went through my mind, and we talked, was we have a chance. They need us. And the other thing that we had done, the things that we had learned from 5 years earlier, is we have to be so good that they need us, that they have to come to us and go, no,
we want the whole Cougar Nation.
We want the whole ball of wax. We know exactly what we're getting, and that was why there was so much excitement and enthusiasm. Is okay, if they're leaving, we're in a great position. So one of the things that was so cool about how it all went down is President Worthen, who I've seen President Worthen, and he's been at BYU for a while.
Yeah.
I've seen him in a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different. President Worthen was at his unbelievable very best when we went to present the first time in the Big 12. He was unbelievable. He's so bright, got such a good mind, and he just painted an incredible picture. And there was a lot of research done. We came up with an unbelievable presentation that first time. We had some unbelievable consultants. We had some of the best business minds in the world helping us. People were coming out of the woodworks, Cougar Nation all over the world, all in, telling us whatever you need. It was unbelievable. So we had done that previously. So this time around, President Worthen, in trying to just express, hey, a couple things like this is who we are, they stopped him and said, we know exactly who you are previously, because from 5 years earlier, and basically said that's why we want you. Is they knew they wanted us for exactly who we were. And then you heard it in all the press conferences. It wasn't like they had to say, oh, we're taking them in spite of. They were like, no, we want
them and everything
BYU.
they bring.
That's right. And that's why it was so exciting.
Yeah, it was
it's like, let's go.
So the phrase has been said over and over again, hey, the table was set with the presentations 5 years ago when they did. I mean, it's what you're telling us is that's absolutely true. The table was set.
100%.
And such a good foot was put forward at that time that it was a no-brainer when it came around. So now I want to take you to, so Tom Holmoe gets on the phone. Tom told us in November, he said it was just a short phone call. So I'm just get on the phone, and it's Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlesby, and he basically invites us to join the conference. So Tom hangs up the phone. You guys look at each other. Then what?
Probably the word that comes to mind is just gratitude, that we're going to have the opportunity to do something that we dreamed about. It's what kept us. It's what kept us going. We had always said we have to find our way in. We have to find our way into the game. We stand on the shoulders of some of the greatest athletes and some of the greatest coaches and some of the greatest administrators in the history of the game. We have to find our way in. We have to be in the game, because there's the Power Five, and then there's the
you're in or you're out.
Everything else.
Yeah, and we have been trying and doing an unbelievable job of being nationally relevant.
Yeah.
Outside of the Power Five, but when you're in, it's just different. And we had always believed that we were going to find our way in, and we had been told over and over and over again by the doubters and the naysayers, no chance, it'll never happen because of this, because of that. And then we would look back at them and say, oh, no, it's going to happen. That's what kept us going. And we believed it. And we believed that we were good enough, and we kept talking to our coaches about let's be so good that they want us, that they need us. And look at what happened over those years. We had national champions. We had teams that were right there knocking on the door. We did some incredible things. We were nationally relevant across the board, and that was our presentation to the Big 12 the first time was, hey, you know exactly who we are. And you look at it, in just about every sport, we can compete in the Big 12.
Brian Santiago, the Deputy Athletic Director at BYU, is on the Wise Guys tonight. So Tom hangs up. You two stare at each other, this feeling of gratitude. Who'd you call next?
We actually were pretty tight-lipped about it.
Yeah.
Because
you wanted to scream it to the world, but what?
Yeah, but until you sign.
Yeah, until the contract's signed, it's not signed, right?
Signed, we've all been in this business long enough. But obviously internally the people that needed to know were advised, and then we just
You call Mark Pope?
the coaches were brought into the circle pretty quick.
Pretty quick.
Once everything was done, because the last thing.
So there was
a
a few days you knew you were in before anyone else.
Yeah. And then you've got to sign contracts. You got to make sure that everything is 100% signed, sealed, and delivered. Then you can bring your coaches in. I still remember bringing the coaches in. We had a meeting. It was late one night, and brought all the coaches into the SAB, and Tom, shared the news with them. Said, we wanted you to be the first ones to know. This is it. It's happening.
That's so
They're
cool.
announcing it. There was a great feeling of excitement, and there was some people
trepidation.
Some people going,
going,
this is not going to be easy, right?
No, because let's face it, the whole game's changed.
Yeah.
And if you're not enthusiastic about going against the best in the country night in and night out in every sport,
And not everyone is.
and not everyone is, and there's pressure that's different.
Yeah.
The stakes are higher, the pressures on coaches are higher. Everybody's going to scrutinize more. You're looking at those schools up on the board.
Yeah.
You start thinking about, obviously, football. You start thinking about men's basketball.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
We were talking about in the last segment. Night in and night out is just like Gonzaga coming in there. So there was great enthusiasm, excitement, passion, a feeling of let's go. We have work to do between now and when we tip in the fall of 2023. We have to be ready, and it's going to take some transition, and that's where we kind of launched into, and it was like, let's go. We've got to make some significant investments. We've got to make sure that they have the resources available to them so we can be great.
And this is all still going on, right? There's still this build that has to take place between now and then, right?
Yeah, and listen, we don't want to just limp into the Big 12. We want to be ready.
Yeah.
So we can compete day one across the board in every sport. We want to compete.
The official invite comes on Friday morning, September 10th. The next day, this is 2021, BYU goes out and beats Utah in front of a sold-out Lavell Edwards Stadium. Has there ever been a pair of back-to-back days more significant than those two in the history of BYU sports, and maybe even BYU?
Super meaningful because of the magnitude of what had just been announced, the buildup of needing to find a way to beat Utah. The feeling in that stadium that night was palpable. If you remember, you could feel it before the game. I mean, I said to a couple of people, like, can you feel it?
It felt like
And Jets were coming.
It felt like the Miami game
And
to me a
then
little bit.
the Jets.
Anytime Jets are coming.
Then the Jets lower the boom on the stadium.
Thanks to our buddy Clark.
Oh,
Right?
yeah, it was awesome.
We've had the guy that coordinates all that on the show.
They lowered the boom.
Oh, yes, they did.
And there were a couple people that hit the ground. They thought the world was ending. But the feeling when those Jets took off, the way the team played that night, the Nakua brothers had a big part in us winning that game. Those were two super meaningful days that just kind of jump-started where we're going. And the enthusiasm the meter has been at a 10 ever since. It's like
So fun.
It's so exciting and so challenging.
Yeah, there's a lot to be done still.
Yeah.
By the way, we talked to Clark, and we said those Jets seemed really low. Can you go below the hard deck? And did you go below the deck that you're not supposed to go below for that? And he looked at us and he said, "It's classified information that we cannot talk about."
Well, Jen Rockwood was on this show, and she said it scared her to death.
Yes,
Because they came in, they were a little late because the band finished early.
Yeah.
So they kicked in some burners, and they came flying in.
Oh,
And
my
right
goodness.
over the side. We showed the part of the soccer game. They're just playing, and all of a sudden, Armageddon flies over.
Right over the soccer game.
And they were on their way to the
And
stadium.
they went right at Mount Timpanogos, and then just went, and just turned and missed it.
Hey, Danny and Michelle Ainge were coming to the game. They sat with us that night. And Michelle hit the ground.
She did.
On the ground all the way, and we laughed. It's so fun.
There was so much momentum from the announcement. There was honestly, my favorite part about that football game was when they interviewed Kyle Whittingham, he said, we got pushed around, physically beat up, and that doesn't ever happen to us.
Yeah, it happened that night.
And to go play in the Big 12, we're going to have to be able to do that, to be physical and out-physical people.
That's right, and the consistency, right?
Right.
You have to have enough depth that you can be consistent night in, night out, playing against what we're going to play against. And,
Right.
and that's what you want. And you know, football is probably the most prepared because they've been playing a Power 5 schedule as an independent.
Yeah.
So we've played.
I mean, their Pac-12 championship last year.
We've played series of games where you're playing against those caliber teams night in and night out, and we've had to be consistently physical. Yep. But that's going to be the challenge. Is we're going to have to be able to withstand.
How many times a day are you asked the question that we're about to ask you? Is where is the schedule for the fall for the Big 12 football, and what's taking so long?
Well, listen, I don't think.
First of all, how many times a day do you get it?
I get asked.
We've asked you it 5 times
Every
already.
time we see you, we ask.
Yeah, and I think it's not rocket science. That there's obviously a
two-pronged hiccup
conversation with two teams on when they are or not leaving the conference, and you know everybody's like, well, let's just do 23 schedule, and then we can figure the rest out later. But the reality is what I'm being told is the conference said that it'll be out by the end of the month. It was supposed to be out by the middle of the month. It's supposed to be out in December.
Supposed to be out by November, or something.
Yeah, but it'll be out by the end of the month, which, you know, we get it. We've seen on paper the teams, and all I say is everybody better be ready.
Better be ready to go.
Better be ready for some October and November.
Now wait a second.
games.
Expound on that, even though you can't. Expound on what is when you look at those teams. And Tom had said too in an interview back in November that you knew who was coming and you knew where BYU was going, just didn't have the dates and some of that stuff. But as you look at that, and I think Cougar Nation will see it and see the realization of this is happening. You've seen that and felt that.
Yeah, it's awesome. The away game's awesome. Home games are awesome. The schedule looks awesome. The biggest change for Cougar Nation is right now with the independent schedule. We're used to September and October
being heavy
games,
loaded, and then it
tails
tails off.
Now you're going to see the opposite.
You can build.
So you're going to have October and November games, super meaningful games for potentially conference championships, which we were used to in the past, with the Utah game always being on Thanksgiving weekend, usually for a championship. That's what it's going to be. Is you're going to see a heavy dose of really important games in October and November, whereas all the really big games the last few years have been up front in the schedule in September.
Much more traditional, what we're used to in the old Mountain West. So I won't make you tell us when you think, but let's just make an assumption. I'm going to make an assumption that somehow Texas and Oklahoma figure out how to only play next season and not in 24. If that happens, is there a financial windfall for the new members that are coming into the conference, including BYU? As part of that exit fee, maybe come back to BYU? Is that going to be a financial boon for BYU?
Well, certainly there's going to be a negotiation if those two teams leave early. But it's not classified information for everyone right now to know that if they do leave early, there's a significant penalty they have to pay to the Big 12 conference, which certainly
I think it's $80 million, isn't it?
Well,
unless it's negotiated down somewhere.
Unless it's negotiated down, and that's per school, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So,
and can the SEC front the money?
Yeah, certainly.
So it just doesn't matter where it comes from.
But in today's day, I don't care what numbers you're talking about. $160 million.
It's a lot.
Is a lot of money in this landscape to have somebody come a year early or have somebody. So to answer your question, Blaine, I guess it could be that money goes to the conference, and how they disperse it is how they disperse it. You know, in their disbursements, it's going to be a couple of years before we're at a full share. So I don't know that. But what I do know is that there are significant penalties to protect the conference. It has not been lost on anyone that the way it went down, caught the Big 12 off guard.
and upset
and not happy. So I'm not sure the Big 12's like at the table going, hey, let us see how we can help you.
Right.
You make good on your commitments. And the commitment they have is to be in Oklahoma and Texas have is to
and they
be
got
in the league
leverage
for 2 more years.
They got leverage because USC's going to the Big Ten a year earlier.
Yeah. So
that's what got them all worried.
yeah.
Right?
So the reality of it is the Big 12's in a good spot, and really what the Big 12 is doing is trying to hold those 2 schools accountable to the commitment that they made. However that gets negotiated, I'm sure the SEC will be involved. They'll all negotiate that out. What we have to do is be prepared.
Be ready to go play
for 2023. We got to control the controllables.
If BYU moves to a 7-game home schedule down the road, 3 non-conference and then 4 or 5 Big 12 games, will that scenario likely include a Las Vegas game?
Good.
And if so, would that bring relief to the season ticket holder where they don't have to buy for 7 games? They buy for 6, like normal. And then the Vegas game is everybody gets a shot at it like you've done in the past?
Yeah, it could be. The one thing that I would say to Cougar Nation, and Cougar Nations continue to come strong. Like a little side note, I was super impressed with the crowd the other night at the Pepperdine game.
Yeah.
After a heartbreaking loss.
Yeah, we asked
Cougar
ourselves,
Nation
like, what's going to happen here? And when we walked in the building and it started to fill up to the top, we were like, all right, Cougar Nation.
No, Cougar Nation's been all in. And there's a lot of enthusiasm moving forward. Back to your question is, it could be. There could be games there. But 6 games or 7, even if you add a 7th game, tickets are a bargain at Cougar Stadium.
Compared to the rest of the league.
I think we're competitive, but it's still an unbelievable value to come to that stadium. From those that sit in the prime seats to those that sit in the not so prime seats, everyone is welcome at that stadium, and they're getting an unbelievable value. To pay another $30 to a couple $100 to have a 7th game is very reasonable, more than fair. And I think
Cougar Nation will do it, right?
Well, they've always showed up, and I think Cougar Nation understands we can't be in the Big 12 and operate in an independent and a WCC mindset. We need Cougar Nation more than ever to come to the table. We need our ticket sales. We need to be competitive in our pricing. I had one of our donors call me the other day and offer to buy every one of the front row courtside seats next season for $25,000 a seat.
Just to help out.
And he said, the reason I'm saying this is if we're going to be in the game, ask us to be in the game.
Wow.
We know you're trying to be respectful in what you're charging, but Big 12 basketball coming into the Marriott Center, charge us. To sit on that front row, we should pay that much money. It's worth it, and we want to help the program. We want you guys to be in the game. Ask us to help, we'll help. And we saw it during COVID when Tom Homo went to Cougar Nation and said, we need you. Cougar Nation all over the world came to the table. Cougar Nation is on fire and as powerful right now as it's ever been, and we need them. And if we have a 7-game schedule and the price of the tickets goes up a little bit because we play in Provo, we have confidence that Cougar Nation is going to come to the table and say, let's go.
Do you see 8-game home schedules coming?
I don't know. That's probably
if you've got 4. If you're playing 9 league games in 1 year, there's 4 on the road, the Big 12.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about you got 3 non-conference scheduled for 24. We were talking about it earlier.
I can't remember. There's a couple where I'm like, whoa.
But obviously those
still
can
a little
move around.
That's probably a stretch, but it'll all balance out. You got to keep some balance there.
Yeah, we understand that the Olympic sports schedules. I'm talking soccer, women's volleyball. They're already done, but they haven't been released. What can you tell us about those and when that release will be?
Let's go.
It's gonna be fun, right?
I mean, I've looked at the schedules for the sports. I oversee 10 of the sports.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
the coaches, have they seen them?
Oh, yeah. They've seen them. And, for the most part, most of our coaches are pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
You start talking about some of those Olympic sports. Our volleyball team's not afraid to play the best teams in the country.
Or our soccer team.
Our soccer team's not afraid to play the best
cross-country.
Our cross-country teams, our softball teams.
We had Jen in, and we said, so what's the jump going to be like to the Big 12? And she goes, we're going to compete for a championship right away.
Yeah. And
like no fear.
But you look at it, our softball team They already play a non-conference schedule against the best teams in the country.
None of those teams are afraid.
They're not afraid. And there are a couple of teams that are going to have a tougher.
Baseball's got to build.
But I'm telling you, I was telling Ainge today, I'm really excited about our baseball team and the transfers that they've had come in, the staff that they're building. They've had a couple of big time pitchers come into the program. We're going to compete. We're going to compete right away. But when you see the schedules, listen,
it's going to be fun.
It's just going to be fun. That's what you're getting,
right?
Night in and night out in every sport. It's going to be awesome.
Let's finish with this, and then Blaine's going to hit you up with 5 questions. Okay. You got a sneak preview of when we were grilling Ainge on those. You remain very close to the Lavell Edwards family, and especially with Patty, Lavell's wife, as their bishop, leading up to and through those final days for Lavell when he was still with us. What impressed you the most about him during that time? We all know the wins, we know the championships and all of that stuff, but you were with him in the tender moments of those last few days, conducted the funeral and all of those things. What stood out?
Probably his humility. Wanting to be in good standing with the Lord. We had some unbelievably tender conversations. A couple weeks before he passed, calling me and wanting me to come over and settle his tithes. The quiet behind the scenes acts of kindness to members of the ward that nobody ever saw. The letters to youth in the ward that were struggling, telling them that he believed in them, including my son in the MTC. I had no idea. When he passed, my son wrote me a note and then shared the letter that Lavell had written him in the MTC. The tenderness with Patty, and I don't mean to get emotional, but he was one of the most remarkable human beings that I've ever been around in my life. Everywhere we went, he was revered in the football circles. But, you mentioned Kyle Morrell earlier in this show. You have to remember Kyle Morrell's comments at that 84 celebration about the letter he received in the mail at a really tough time in his life. That's the stuff, in this world that we live in this business that we're in, if we're not in it to try to help these young men and young women fly, help them overcome the challenges, help them go fly and make a difference in the world, inspire them, then why are we in this business? And that's what probably touched me the most about Lavell is, and I've always said this, there are only a few coaches at BYU that if they got on the phone and called every one of their former players and said, I need you back here tomorrow, that every single one of them would come. Lavell's one of them. Mm-hmm. And we saw it everyone came. The walk-ons came. The All-Americans came. The rivals came. This guy, it was about way more than football. And by the way, he was an awfully good coach.
Yeah.
That won a national championship and put BYU on the map forever. But it was all the other stuff that he did to change people's lives. And that's what I got to see from a super close situation. The other thing is he was private.
Yeah.
He just wasn't about himself. He was private. He handled his business in private. He took care of his family, and then, just all the way down. One of the last people he spoke to was Jim McMahon. Jim had gotten word that he was close, and I still remember passing the phone to him. It's one of the last people he spoke to. And just the expressions of love. It doesn't get any better than Lavell Edwards. Patty's not far behind.
Yeah. Appreciate you sharing that. He's got Andy Reid still trying to win a Super Bowl to get that thing done again against the Jags on Saturday. Fred Warner trying to get there. They play the Cowboys on Sunday. Those are the Cougars in the playoffs. And we wish them both the very best. Great examples of great ambassadors of what you're talking about.
But that's the thing, is I think what Lavell created was a love and a passion for this place that carries on to today. I mean, you just talked about two guys that in the last year, Andy Reid's been in that stadium.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in talking to the coaches, the high school coaches. Fred Warner's been at our basketball game at Santa Clara last year. They're
before
all
the
in for
Stanford
this place,
game?
Before the Stanford
Right?
game.
Yeah.
They're all in for this place. And that goes across the board. I just am so
and
impressed with our
Andy's
guys.
patterned a lot of what he's done after Lavell. Lavell was a great mentor to him. I love when Andy came to the game when they had that bye week. And obviously, if Andy comes to a game, Brian and these guys, we're going to find him a place to sit wherever he wants. You know where Andy wanted to sit? Just up in the stands with his family, with everybody.
Oh yeah, we had a box for him up there.
Yeah. No, Andy just
we
wanted to
laid it
sit in the
out,
stand.
and he said that, and he said, "Yeah, I just want to be a normal guy." He's Andy Reid. They don't get any better than that.
No, I mean
He's the best. Was it not just the greatest when they finally broke through?
Yeah.
Like if you, it was.
And they got a
one of my-
shot?
it
They got a
was-
legitimate
they
shot
got
to
a
get another
legitimate
one.
shot. And the thing that says the most is when he did break through, the response from his players, former players, the people, like
every coach in the league, every player in the
everybody
league respects him.
It's just that's the stuff where you
And
know
he's
what
and
those guys
Andy's
are like.
built his thing after Lavell, and people would always ask me like, "Hey, you met with Lavell every year for your annual meeting?" And then he and I got closer when I was done playing and broadcasting. But they'd say, "What would you talk about?" And I said, "Very little about football. We would just talk about life and how I was doing and all these kinds of things." Like every time I talked to Lavell, that's what it was about. It wasn't really about football. And it's just funny because when Andy and I talk, we hardly ever talk about football. It's just like Lavell. We just talk about what's going on with life and what's going on with kids and what's doing all that. He's built just like Lavell because Lavell was his mentor.
Yeah, and being around Tom Holmoe, being around Bosco, being around Chad Lewis, the way they revere Lavell, and you're not going to find a better human being in college athletics than Tom Holmoe. That's just one of the best human beings. He's done an unbelievable job as the athletic director, but he was mentored and taught by Lavell.
Yeah.
And they feel a sense of responsibility. Kalani feels a deep sense of
Yes, he
responsibility
does.
to do things the right way because Lavell asked him to take care of this program. It's awesome.
Let's finish with 5 questions for Brian Santiago, the deputy AD at BYU, and then we're going to throw out we'll give you our inspirational quote of the week and say goodnight.
Yep. So, favorite sports movie, B?
It's going to be Hoosiers.
I'll be honest, I did not expect Chariots of Fire from Danny Ainge.
Danny goes with Chariots of Fire.
With Chariots of Fire, I love Rudy.
All right.
I love Rudy too, and Gavin gives me a little bit of hassle. He's like, better than Remember the Titans. I go, no, they're different. I like them both.
I like them both. I love Remember the Titans.
And we've had a chance to meet Rudy, who's joined the church, and we did a thing with him back at Notre Dame when we were back there playing. So we've gotten to know him a little bit, which makes me even love it more.
Yeah, it's just I love the story. I love the chance.
Underdog.
I just come from a family with my 2 brothers that are both walk-ons and had great careers at BYU, and I just love
the whole family shoot
opportunity.
3-pointers. Is that what's going on over there?
Everybody can shoot it. Everybody can shoot it. One of us can shoot it better.
Favorite singer or band?
I know you guys talked about it earlier. I've never been a country music.
Yeah, me either. But I'm learning from Brenda.
But
by the way, Brian's wife also plays tennis with Michelle and
yeah,
Brenda.
Kim's all in on this tennis.
And by the way, Kim is also very intense.
She's
Can't imagine.
These women are intense when they play tennis.
They are.
So, and they're all good friends. So
I growing up, big Billy Joel guy.
Oh, love Billy Joel. You're the first one that said Billy Joel.
Wait. I don't know if that's his answer. That was just growing
Big,
up.
You know, big Billy Joel, and I can go with Billy Joel. I've just seen some of the greatest concerts. I saw Garth Brooks in his private.
Yeah, in Vegas.
Oh,
yeah. Awesome.
Which, and I got to tell you a quick story on that. Right. I'll be quick.
We're good.
You guys know I don't leave basketball games early ever. But I had tickets to that show. It was my wife's birthday.
At the Encore.
Gonna surprise her.
Yeah.
At the Encore. And we're playing San Diego in the WCC tournament. And I left at halftime.
Were we ahead?
And the coach, we were up by 2.
Okay.
The coaches see me leaving the arena, rows and all.
Oh, no.
You should have gone out the other door.
Well, I thought I had made the right exit. And then in that show, if you remember, they don't allow you to have phones or anything. And so I was trying to check the scores. We ended up winning before the show started, which was good. But
Yeah, that is
when
good.
I turned my phone on after the show, Coach Rose, where were you going? And I just said, birthday surprise.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Garth is unbelievable.
Trust me,
Billy
Cheryl
Joel.
would rather be at Garth than at a basketball game.
Billy Joel.
That Garth
Billy
Brooks
Joel.
song, like Meet Your Mom, oh my gosh. I can't.
That's a good one.
So, favorite breakfast cereal?
And for the love, don't say shredded wheat. We've already heard that once
said
tonight.
frosted shredded
come
wheat
on,
just because
come
he
on.
said shredded wheat.
Yeah.
But I am, I'm a big honey bunches of oats.
You know what? That's
with
very
sliced- with frosted flakes in there to give it a little more sweet,
You'll
have a
mix
little more sugar.
a little
yeah.
more sugar.
It's like crossing the streams.
with bananas.
Frosted flakes.
So
Honey
that's the
Bunches-
healthy part? That's the healthy part?
Well, I get just the banana adds some more sweet.
That's
I'm
like
all
a
about
hat
the
trick.
sugar.
That's a hat
All
trick.
about
On
the sugar.
this show, B, we respect people that eat lots of sugar in their cereal.
I'm a sugar guy. That's a pretty good combo, right?
That's
there.
a
We've
great
had a
answer.
we've
Honey
had a
bunches
bunch
of
of
oats.
we've had a bunch
with-
of guests on this show, and not one has said
Well,
shredded
so
wheat.
you
till
know
tonight.
Scott Warner. You know Scott, right? Scott Warner.
Yeah.
Scott's a huge, like, he's a cereal aficionado. Like
Yeah.
he lives it.
He likes the. What did he tell you?
What is Scott's? Do you remember what Scott's is?
We actually mixed it and ate.
yeah,
we mixed
we
three
mixed a
boxes
bunch
here.
together that he had us mix together. He
I
bought
think
them
he's
on the
cinnamon
show.
toast
Cinnamon
crunch.
Toast Crunch.
I
Yeah.
think that's what he is.
Yeah. He's Captain Crunch, but not with crunch berries, which I don't
Just
even
like it straight.
understand.
It's fair.
So,
But
I'm Cinnamon Life, and this is my Danny Plater, who came to our house every Sunday for the last 5 years of his life. We had in our cupboard, he would just come in, go right into the cupboard, and get out his Apple Jacks. And so I'm not, Brian, it'll be a Sunday afternoon, and I just go, and there's still the bin of Apple Jacks. I'm just like, in honor of Danny, I'm having Apple Jacks today.
why wouldn't you?
I got to have Apple
But I
Jacks.
do love and will throw frosted mini wheats
Okay, that's
in with that.
See, that's not bad. Frosted mini wheats is okay, but
it's
shredded
like a
wheat.
circus in your bowl
We're gonna have to have a talk with Michelle and tell her to let Danny eat for fun. So
to free him up.
favorite phone call?
Yeah, favorite phone call.
Favorite phone call.
Right. Think about it. Could be with anybody.
Yeah.
Favorite
Like
phone call.
oh yeah, that's right. So if you're gonna have a phone call with it, can they be alive?
Oh, is this a phone call?
No,
that
it's
I,
one you've taken.
the
one
favorite
I've
one you've
actually
ever
had.
Yeah.
taken?
Think about that.
Wow, that's a great question. Back in the day when I hadn't heard from my family for 3.5 months in the Dominican Republic when I was on my mission, and the phone rang and it was my dad.
Nice.
Still remember his voice.
Yeah. That's a good one.
That is a good one.
Yeah, I've had some great phone calls from some influential people, but no, like, yeah, talking to my dad is one of the great joys in life.
I just saw your dad the other night and gave him a hug.
Just the best.
So
Just the best. But that was probably one of the most meaningful phone calls. I hadn't received a letter, hadn't received any word. It was going on 4 months. And then it was finally Christmas time, and my phone rang, and it was my dad. That was a good day.
one.
I remember, it reminds me, after my dad passed away, I was driving back to Las Vegas, and I was calling my mother, and she had his cell phone. So I called that number, and it rang a few times, and his voicemail picked up and said, "Hey, leave a message. I'll call you right back." And I thought what I wouldn't do to be able to have my dad call me back.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was a meaningful phone call.
yeah.
So,
All right.
And then your favorite Steve Cleveland story, because he gave us the one about you. We thought it was only fair.
Probably one of my favorite Cleve stories, and certainly there's some golf ones that are great. We've had some great golf moments together. But
Just know this may be verified by the other party involved.
This is a good one because this was a part of BYU history. Because there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into Cleve turning around the BYU basketball program. And we were in that fourth year, and us getting a piece of the championship depended on UNLV and Wyoming game. We were in Air Force. We had won, but we needed the right thing to happen in that other game to get a piece of the championship and be conference champs in the fourth year. And we were all out trying to get a signal on KSL radio, or it wasn't even KSL. It would have been, either Wyoming or UNLV, trying to just hear the game, because back then you couldn't just plug in. And we found one out in the parking lot. What we needed to happen happened. We were conference champs, and it was sheer joy. And we went. I was with Coach Rose at the time. Cleve was in his room doing the same thing, and we went to Cleve's room, and we were like, we're conference champs. And the celebration in that little moment of just kind of a culmination of 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears, of being sent to the end of the bench, from sitting at the front of the bench,
and sending Rose there to keep you there,
to just all the blood, sweat, and tears, the elation of being conference champs and bringing that pride and tradition back to BYU basketball was a great, great moment.
Yeah, that was a hey, what Cleve did, I hope never gets overlooked.
No.
To come in and to turn that thing around and get them back where we expected that we'd be in NCAA tournaments, that we expected we would compete for conference championships and all that again. It was a remarkable job.
Well, he said it on the path, the people that he surrounded himself with.
Right on.
Dave Rose takes over the program. Heath Schroyer goes and is a very successful coach at 2 or 3 places. He's the one that opened the door for me to be part of the BYU family administration. So we all owe a great deal of gratitude to Steve Cleveland. He's the one that kind of got that program going the right direction.
Our Wise Guys inspirational quote of the week. Let's roll out with that. We'll skip birthdays and all that other stuff.
We're going to go with Rocky Balboa, which
seems fitting for tonight.
Yeah, I think it is fitting for tonight. This is a Rocky Balboa quote. It's from the movie, but since Sylvester Stallone wrote the movie, it's from Sylvester Stallone. Right?
And to a lot of us, Rocky Balboa is a real person.
That's right. So that's exactly right. So he says, "You, me, or nobody is going to get hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done."
That's how Rocky did it. That's how Brian Santiago did it, how Danny Ainge did it. And that's one of the great quotes that covers so many different things, but motivates you to keep going. Our inspirational quote of the week. Danny Ainge, Brian Santiago, we thank them for stopping by. It's great having you here. You're welcome anytime.
Hey, thank you guys. Nice to be with you.
When that schedule comes out, we may have to have you back to break it down.
Let's go. We're ready.
Next week, defensive coordinator Jay Hill and baseball head coach Trent Pratt ahead of their big fundraising event and the new season. Podcast will be up tomorrow. We encourage you to share it with everybody and plan to be with us next week. For Dave McCann, Blaine Fowler, Brian Santiago, that's it. We're done for the week. How are we going to make it 6 more days before the next show?
See you next week. We can do it.
We'll do it. See ya.